and that is if there is this tornado on the ground. That's what happens in terms of, some of the flashes that we see from it hitting power lines, generators, everything of the sort there. Again, this is heading up to the northeast into Peoria, Illinois. Pekin, 8:03, East Peoria, 8:09. So you have some time, but 8:10 for Peoria proper. This cell is heading directly, it looks like directly into Peoria over the next 20 minutes or so. So we continue to track this. We'll continue to give you live updates. We are going to take a break, but we will give you live updates on this confirmation of a tornado. That's coming up after the break.
Jacob Wheeler here, going to talk about how to select the perfect line for the application you're fishing.
And thanks for staying with us. We continue with this Fox weather alert right now. Lewistown, Illinois. Look at those dark clouds up in the distance. And we've been tracking a lot of these storms with a lot of these storm trackers out there as well tonight.
And now we look at the live shot from Brandon Ivy in Lewistown, Illinois. Brandon, we have you on the phone. We can see some of the destruction there. It looks like to some farm equipment. So tell us what you're seeing yourself on the ground there.
Yes, that is farm equipment in front of us. We've stopped and checked some of the structures that have been hit in the area just north of Lewistown. And there were two homes south of this location that were heavily damaged. We stopped and talked with the owners. Everybody was all right at that location. We tried to continue north, up the highway up north of Lewistown, the highway going just northeast of here. There's sheet metal across the road, so that stopped us from getting any further north. We came back west here. So really our only route to get back down to Lewistown is to go south down the highway. But yeah, a couple of structures have been hit in this area, but as far as we've been checking, everybody's okay.
Brandon, that's good news. You're the first one on the scene sometimes. You're checking in on the folks, and thankfully they're okay. We saw you do a U-turn on that 2-lane road because there was debris on there. But then we also saw it looked like power lines that were either tilted over or in some cases on the road. Yes, we did have debris a little bit easier and check on other homes. Unfortunately, we're in a sedan, so we navigated through the debris as safely and bestly as we could to check on some homes in the area. But outside of that, with the limitations of our vehicle, we can't get through some of the ditches and get around some of the heavier debris to check on other locations in this area. But as I speak, I see probably at least half a dozen flashing lights all around me. So there are police in this area checking on people, and some people with vehicles that can't access some of those areas where large debris is blocking the road at this time.
Right. I'm sure it's going to be a process through the night. You mentioned that everyone you talk to is okay in the form of injury. So I'm happy to hear that. But, you know, have you been able to talk to people a little bit more? What are people's reactions?
Well, there were a couple of people that the first house we came to, obviously people are in shock and they're in panic. They can't, believe just what happened. They're assessing the damage. They're collecting their thoughts. Luckily, nobody has been seriously injured that we came across. This was a fast-moving tornado. Some of the tornadoes we saw today became wrapped in rain very rapidly, which makes it even harder to see if you're standing at the front door waiting to get visual confirmation that tornado is coming towards your property. And with storms moving 45, 50 miles an hour, those tornadoes are moving almost a mile a minute. So if you're not heeding those warnings, you can get caught off guard and not get to shelter. If you're not taking it seriously. But fortunately in this area, like I said, everybody's okay. They're just a little rattled as they have been impacted by this tornado.
And Brandon, now that you've got to backtrack in a way because some of these roads are blocked, will you backtrack and then head back toward Peoria, or you got about 100,000 people watching these storms headed their direction?
Yes, we'll actually have to go back south to Lewis town, and unfortunately, as fast as this storm is moving, we're not going to be able to catch up with it. So we'll continue to check some homes that we can access in this area and probably work our way further south. And currently, I don't see any other storms further to our south, but the cold front's actually supposed to produce a lot of tornadic storms through Missouri overnight. We may travel back down that way and try to get some of the overnight storms in that area, just so we can not only report on the severe weather, but then if we have any close encounters with tornadoes, we can kind of check the local area to make sure everybody's okay and doesn't need immediate help. We're kind of waiting in this area. There was a person that did get caught in the tornado in their vehicle. We were going to give them a ride back to town after they collect some of their belongings, but outside of that, we'll probably head back to Missouri and wait for the second round of storms to come through overnight.
Right, that's the nature of the storm chase, always having to kind of adjust your route depending on what Mother Nature brings you. So, we continue to watch this same storm that you've been tracking lifting up to the northeast in Peoria. So what you've seen on the ground in Lewistown with that and what you know about this storm system, what would you tell people in Peoria right now as they're awaiting this storm over the next 20 minutes or so?
Well, I would definitely say to take the storm seriously as it comes in. We've seen tornadoes develop. They get rain wrapped very quickly and just immediately off to the east or southeast. Minutes later, another one's on the ground. So at least when it was down in this area, it was in a very volatile atmosphere that was very conducive for tornadoes to develop very quickly. And then they're getting wrapped in rain as well.
Brandon, I've got a question for you. As you head down maybe to Missouri, you're watching that front. That front is producing a whole bunch of severe thunderstorm warnings down over portions just to your west. How late do you stay out? And then at what point do you just pull over and sleep in your car, or do you find a hotel?
Yeah, usually we don't do a lot of night chasing, but tonight we may head back to central Missouri where we started the chase from and get over into that area, depending on what storms do. But a lot of times we do just stay in hotels if we're pretty far away from home. But since there's a threat in Missouri tonight and we're heading back that anyway, we're going to cover that aspect of the severe weather. It's kind of a rare setup where tornadoes will be possible well into the overnight hours, maybe even as the sun comes up in the morning through central and eastern Missouri. So we're going to go cover some of that area as we head back to home in central Missouri.
Yeah, and that's the major concern with a lot of these storms being at night. You sometimes are the ground truth, first time on the ground or first one on the ground with some of these storms passing up overhead. That's been a major concern. I think, especially since we're going through this, we just had the outbreak last Friday into Saturday, and a lot of these same areas are under the threat again tonight.
Yeah, we were actually up chasing in northwestern Illinois on Friday and got a brief tornado just kind of east in this area. So, yeah, the same areas are being impacted. Iowa had some big tornadoes on Friday, and they've had some tornadoes a little bit further west where those tornadoes tracked through on Friday. So it does seem like the same areas are getting hit again. And then we'll have round 2 coming through the overnight hours through Missouri and Arkansas with that cold front as it swings through.
It's been quite the season so far, as we are only in the first few weeks into, the spring season. Of course, we will continue to check in with you. We wish you luck as you head farther off to the south in Missouri, and we hope you stay safe through the rest of the evening.
Yeah, and it has been such an active night here on Fox Weather. Earlier, we caught a lot of this live as storm tracker Brandon Clement was out there as well. And we continued with this Fox Weather alert right through the evening hours. Just what it looked like earlier. Look at that rope that it produced, that tornado.
These tornadoes stretching from Iowa into Illinois, where we have previously, earlier today, confirmed an EF2 in Kelowna, Illinois. We continue to watch our Fox Weather alert system as we see the changes. Severe thunderstorm warnings, tornado warnings, and some watches posted. We'll have some more updates for you with the live radar. That's coming up just after the break.
Before and bath fitter. Now's the time to call Bath Fitter to get a beautiful after. With our unique tub-over-tub process, there's no mess or stress. Bath Fitter, it just fits. Visit bathfitter.com to book your free consultation.
I have a surprise for you.
I have a surprise for you.
What? Let's say it at the same time.
Okay, 3, 2, 1.
I booked
a rustic cabin in Vermont.
Beach.
Free cancellation on most days.
Well, that's good too.
That's nice.
Booking.com, booking.
Yeah.
Most energy drinks taste like crap. Enter Sneak. Energy, focus, and concentration. 15 awesome flavors. With no artificial flavors or colorings. 0 sugar and 0 crash. Feel different. Drink Sneak.
You're never responsible for unauthorized purchases on your Discover card.
Fox Weather Alert here tonight. We're tracking the potential for more tornadoes. This is a look in Lacona, Iowa, where we have previously confirmed this, and you see it visually on the ground from Brandon Clement, where we see Live Storms Media tracking this system, potentially a tornado outbreak into the rest of the evening.
And these storms, they've already produced. As we were looking at some of those dangerous tornadoes, we're going to see them affect over 13 states, some of which still recovering from last week's deadly tornado outbreak.
And this is an expansive system spanning from Michigan all the way down to Texas, with some major cities in the bullseye. Tonight's biggest concern, dangerous long-track tornadoes into the night. We're tracking it all right here on Fox Weather.
Yeah, we're going to track it throughout the evening. It looks like it's a stormy night right now there in Des Moines, seeing some lightning. Welcome on in. I'm Stephen Morgan.
And I'm Bridget Mahoney. Thanks so much for joining us. Let's get to some of the updates that we want to see in terms of the radar, where we're seeing multiple severe thunderstorm warnings. Not only that, some confirmations of tornadoes.
It's, Bridget, as if once the sun has set, things are beginning to ramp on up. And you and Craig tracking this live in Lacona, Iowa. Incredible to see that rope tornado and some of that dirt and dust kicked up as a result with this storm. Brandon Clement capturing this, and we still are dealing with the tornado warning, that tornado warning for central portions of Illinois, north central really. And as far as the threat is concerned, it is moving toward Peoria. It's just to the west of Bloomington, and for perspective's sake, we see where Chicago is. As this storm moves off to the east, it's got that look. It's got those indications that we very well could be dealing with a storm that's producing a tornado, and perhaps it's cycling just a little bit. As we're taking a look at the velocity, it is approaching Pekin, Illinois, under that tornado warning. The town of Peoria, eastern parts of the city of Peoria, not in that tornado warning, but that storm is moving in the direction. In fact, we have some pretty significant hail associated with this storm as well. In Tazewell County in Illinois, this tornado warning goes until 8:15. And as far as the hail is concerned, we're talking about 2 inches in diameter, so a little closer to tennis ball size hail. This storm, as it moves off to the east, and perhaps we'll get a new scan of radar regarding that hail, you can see how it's displaced a little bit from where the actual storm is. The core of it over Bartonville, North Pekin, and Peoria. This storm's moving off to the east-northeast at about 50 miles an hour, and as it pushes on through, I'm telling you, this is an environment where we could quickly see this thing spin on up. And we're looking at Brandon Clement's live shot there in Grinnell, Iowa, as we have other storms back to the west, a little closer to where the area of low pressure, this surface low, is beginning to develop. But where that perhaps rotation is, it's got that nasty notch, that almost 90-degree, that right angle, that's allowing that inflow wind at least to move into the storm. And as it breathes, as it vents, we could see this thing cycle and produce another tornado. So being in that safe place important. As we were talking, looks as if that severe thunderstorm warning is encompassing this storm as well. But we have that tornado possible. That's going to keep this storm a threat, at least for the next 45 minutes or so. Until 8:45, we have that severe thunderstorm warning. So that's through central portions of the state of Illinois. Let's now go farther to the west. This is to the east of Des Moines, as it's a little closer to where our cold front is located, but still a couple of these storms are popping up. We've not had an environment this afternoon because we've been dealing with a cap, and this cap has been in place for a good chunk of the day. We only saw a little bit of this initialization of these storms occur as we worked a little closer to sunset, and now we're dealing with, at least in this moment, a confirmed tornado warning over Ewart, over Brooklyn, Iowa, right along Interstate 80 here, Ladora just to the east, and as this storm lifts off to the east-northeast, it also could be producing this tornado as that confirmed tornado warning runs until 8:30. Tama County, Iowa, one of the counties that is in this warning. Again, 8:30 is how long it lasts. And here it is again, one of those individual storms where we're dealing with just a supercell that's capable of producing this tornado. In Des Moines, you can see that live shot right now off to the west, and check it out on radar. What we have moving through, more of a broken line of storms, perhaps an indication that this is where that cold front is located. The question is, how fast is this cold front going to move on through? Because anywhere out ahead of that cold front, we're going to be dealing with these individual storms, these supercells that could be popping on up. This entire line of storms associated more so with that cold front, they are warned, and they extend well west of Kansas City and south, even a little closer to Emporia there. As these storms race off to the east, they're also packing some significant winds, perhaps on the order of 60 miles an hour, producing the possibility of maybe a little bit of small hail too. So this is probably going to be the event that's more widespread, where we see these storms eventually work on through. But until then, we're going to be in this environment, say, for example, in Kansas City, for the next couple of hours, waiting on these storms to move on through. They're moving off to the northeast, but also that overall eastward progression as we have those winds aloft that are pushing those to the east. These storms are going to be some nasty ones too. I mean, we've got a nice wind environment, at least for these storms this evening, and you can see plenty of lightning up there in Des Moines. Iowa right now remains the focus. And keep in mind, when we're looking at the threats here, the northern side of this storm is really what's turning on as we speak and heading into the evening or the later hours. If we look farther to the south in places like Arkansas, parts of Oklahoma, a lot of development yet to occur. Perhaps we'll be seeing that take place as we work into the next couple of hours. Of course, we'll be watching it. But right now, again, we have one confirmed tornado warning. Looks like that has perhaps been replaced with the severe thunderstorm warning. We'll, of course, check in on that. The confirmed tornado warning in Iowa runs until 8:30, and then we have a separate severe thunderstorm warning as well as a tornado warning right over Peoria for the town of Pekin. That runs until 8:45. So two of these storms right now showing those indications that we might be dealing with a little bit of rotation, and that could result in these tornadoes. But this line of storms, as it continues to push off to the east, it is going to also give us those damaging winds, perhaps that large hail, as that cold front works on through. So that's what we're dealing with this evening, and then as we work into the overnight hours, going to still move on through, not going to see these really lose a lot of energy or steam, because the overall dynamics of the system, they are different tonight. And as far as the winds are concerned, we're going to see them, in fact, increase. And as we get some of this upper level support, Bridget, as that moves into the Midwest, that's when these storms could take off and at least have a little bit of sustenance to them and longevity as we head into the overnight hours.
Right. It's still a changeable situation into this evening as we track this system working off to the southeast. What we know right now, this tornado watch is still in effect for northern portions of Missouri through south central Illinois or Iowa into the western half of Illinois. That's in effect until 10 o'clock, and we've already gotten that ground verification of this. Multiple tornadoes so far this afternoon into the evening, now confirmed, whether it's in Iowa or into Illinois. With this, we also have this severe thunderstorm watch in effect for the western half of Missouri as well as eastern Kansas, including Kansas City, up I-29 into St. Joseph, as well as on the northeast side of that, we see that other our severe thunderstorm watch in effect for Illinois. So we watch and we look how expansive this system is as the cold front is expansive as well. And you'll notice that through the southern portion of the tier of this system from I-44 off to the south into Little Rock West. That is where we have a secondary area with the possibility of severe weather, severe storm threat likely. And let's track it out on the northern side of this system where we see with Future Track, it's fairly isolated at this point, but you'll notice through the rest of the evening, and we're already actually starting to see this verify and set up northwestern Missouri, eastern half of Kansas. That's where we get more of that well-defined line. But don't be fooled. Even along that line, we could see the possibility of some of that rotation, all because of the environment that this system is entering into as it trails off to the east. We've been talking about a cap in our atmosphere through the day today. That's why we didn't really see many afternoon storms earlier in the day. That cap is eroding and continues to erode. So thunderstorms are starting to flourish. It looks like we may have a new tornado warning in effect. It looks like for Peoria County, Illinois, as well as Tazewell, Woodford, all of those counties included in this new tornado warning. This is a cell that has previously been producing and previously has been confirmed a tornado. No confirmation, I don't believe, on this same system as of now. But with that, we have the potential of that rotation. We will get to that tornado warning in just a minute, but you'll watch with Future Track how it evolves through the rest of this evening. And then tomorrow morning, 11 a.m., drying up for portions off to the west, including Kansas City, Columbia, Missouri, but then moving off to the east into, the Ohio River Valley, stretching down through Kentucky through your Wednesday. And Stephen, this is a look at that new tornado warning in effect for Peoria County, Illinois. Unfortunately, so Peoria, over 100,000 people in the line of this rotation.
Yeah, it's a pretty big town there and a major thoroughfare, of course, if you're heading towards Chicago, say from Missouri or Iowa. Peoria there, as we have that newly issued tornado warning, not a confirmed tornado warning, as this storm has had a history of producing a tornado, as we have been watching pretty carefully. But now that we've seen this tornado warning go into effect, this radar indicated, we're seeing a little bit of that rotation perhaps strengthening or organizing just a little bit, going to be moving off to the east-northeast. And you see the towns, all of these towns in Illinois, most of them to the east of Peoria. But as we speak, that rotation very close to downtown, what we would see as downtown Peoria. It's going to be moving right over East Peoria, Averyville.
Ray Magliozzi here. When you need parts, eBay Motors ensures a guaranteed fit. Hey, Dave?
Yep. Wait,
How are those new wipers?
they're small.
Just go to eBay Motors where the check means a guaranteed fit. Let's ride.
That that rotation, a little tough to see, but we're seeing it perhaps over Bartonville, just off to the east. As far as it correlating with reflectivity, hard to see there. Maybe, zooming in a little bit between East Peoria and Peoria, that's at least where we would see perhaps that inflow. And then this storm, as it races off to the east-northeast, it's also going to be bringing with it, and it is as we speak, into Trail Park Gardens, Averyville, Germantown Hills. Probably some significant hail, too. Let's bring in Fox Weather multimedia journalist Mitty Hicks joining us now by phone. She's there in Peoria as this storm is moving on through. Mitty, as I understand it, the power's out in Peoria. Take us through what led to that power eventually going out for you.
Yeah, Stephen, I hope you can hear me because right now I'm in the bathroom of my hotel. I'm in the tub because I just got the emergency alert on my phone that says, take shelter now in a basement or an interior room on the lowest floor or of a sturdy building, really to protect ourselves from any flying debris. And, we've been here in Peoria for the past few hours. We've been on standby, waiting on the severe weather to come to our area. And the next thing I know, the electricity is flickering in my hotel room. So the lights went off briefly, Stephen, but only half of the lights came back on. The AC, it isn't running anymore. So, again, I'm in the bathroom just trying to stay away from the windows. I have the bathroom light off, but what I can see is the lightning. You can really see that kind of lighting up my hotel room right now. And across the street, before I ran into the bathroom, it looks pretty dark, and it didn't look like that a few moments ago. So that may indicate a few outages or people just trying to protect themselves, hopefully taking cover and in their safe space. And, guys, we talk about this stuff all the time, but I will tell you, it's actually pretty terrifying to hear the thunder above me. It literally sounds like, a bowling alley is above me. But there's also that element of being on the ground during some of these scary, severe events. I mean, Stephen, Bridget, we know the kind of damage these severe storms can do. That's why I'm in the bathroom. I don't hear any sirens just yet, but I'm watching the Fox Weather app. But the overall goal here is to sit here, stay here until this warning lets up about 8:30 local time. And my goal is just to stay safe, guys.
That's the important thing. And thank you for telling us what you're hearing, what you're seeing with those frequent flashes of lightning. Mitty, right now, for perspective, we're showing that storm that's right over Peoria. We've got some heavier rain farther to the north and east, also where the hail is. This storm right now, which is tornado warned, it's also producing golf ball size hail. It runs until 8:30, so being protected there. How about the winds? Are you able to hear the winds? Are they howling out there? I would imagine for that power to go out, perhaps it was lightning, but the winds can also be a culprit when it comes to power outages. Are those particularly strong as what your ears are telling you?
Yeah, that's a good question, Stephen. So the winds were pretty strong earlier today, and there's that eerie feeling you get when you hear those winds. You know what to expect. Now, that was hours before this storm came, or, before it got to our area at least. So I'm not hearing the wind as much, and it's probably because I'm in the bathroom. I actually hear the thunder a lot more.
You know what's good as we're watching this storm, the circulation is dissipating just a little bit. So perhaps with that weakening trend, we're going to see this storm continue to be a dangerous one. But perhaps we're not seeing that organization, the National Weather Service, not seeing that organization like we saw earlier minutes ago, really. And Mitty, as you know, that's just how these storms go. I mean, sometimes they quickly rotate, pick up in intensity, and then they can produce a tornado. Nonetheless, we still have that tornado warning for a portion of Peoria County, Tazewell County in Illinois that runs until 8:30. But it is good news to hear that maybe a little bit of weakening associated with the storm. As far as those conditions leading up to it, I mean, looking at the temperatures, they were mild. I mean, did it feel like a spring day? Was it more like a summer day? I know you've spent some time up in Minneapolis, so you know this part of the country quite well. Is it abnormal for early March, you'd say?
You know what? One of the things that stuck out to me earlier today was the fact that it was so warm. When on my journey here, I had my snow boots on because last weekend when we were in Chicago and we did our severe weather coverage in Belvidere, Illinois, it was freezing outside. We had our snow boots, our snow gear, all that good stuff on. And I came down to Peoria with all that gear on. Luckily, I had tennis shoes and I had my rain pants instead of my snow boots. And it felt like a beautiful spring day. Temperatures were beautiful. It felt good out. The sun was out briefly. People were out and they were walking along the river. So despite what we're seeing now, earlier today was just a great day to be out.
That's sometimes the price that has to be paid, though. As a result, we've got that storm. I think fresh in the Lincoln office there in Illinois, the National Weather Service going ahead and expiring at 9:15, a part of that tornado warning. We're still keeping this one, though, that runs until 8:30 local time. So that tornado warning still in effect for you guys. As we're watching this storm, though, Mitty, we are beginning to see it lift off to the north and to the northeast. And it sounds like that we actually have had that warning canceled. So there you go, as we're watching this storm. Still a dangerous one, but good to hear and to let you know, Mitty, that this warning has been allowed to expire a little early. So they canceled it about 15 minutes early. They've replaced it with the severe thunderstorm warning. That's for Tazewell, Woodford, as well as Peoria counties in Illinois until 8:45. So we'll still continue with those damaging winds, that threat there. But Mitty Hicks, we'll let you get back to what you need to. Glad that you're safe. Going to that bathroom, always an important thing. Appreciate your perspective. And Bridget, we'll just bring you in here as this one storm has produced a bit of a scare because there was a confirmed tornado that we had on this one before it worked into Peoria.
Yeah, that was on the backside of Peoria, back out to the southwest. So we continue to watch that, but we are happy that some of that rotation is falling apart. This is a look at the timeline for Fort Smith, Arkansas. We remember less than a week ago in Fort Smith, that's where we have confirmed an EF3 on Friday. And you see the timeline here. We have more storms in the forecast over the next several hours. This is as the southern edge of the system is going to be a little bit later in the night tonight with that advancing cold front off to the east. So portions of Little Rock, including Clinton, up to the North Harrison, back through Texarkana, going to see the possibility of a later in the night event. So we'll track it out with Future Track. What you'll notice through the timeline, we have some scattered rain leading up to this system about 10 o'clock this evening. But watch, we may see an isolated rogue storm or two for Fort Smith by midnight or just beyond. So isolated storms will develop. As they do so, some of those can twist and spin, but more so into early tomorrow morning on your Wednesday, 4 a.m. That's where we see that dragging effect of the cold front working off to the east, where we'll at least get heavy rain in the line of the system, but also the possibility of some of those strong damaging winds, not to mention the possibility of this twisting and turning atmosphere that we've seen so far through this afternoon. So the tornado threat is still persisting, even in Little Rock, southwest from there, Texarkana, including in St. Louis. St. Louis, your morning commute could be a bit of a difficult one as you head out, and we see that main line swing through your area by 5 to about 9 a.m. in the morning. That's your time frame that you are going to want to look out for through the rest of the evening. So radar, Stephen, on the southern edge of the system has been fairly quiet so far. Things to the north have been a little bit busier, but the southern edge, it's just a waiting game at this point.
Yeah, and we're still waiting on some of these storms to develop. So, Bridget, as we continue to watch, we've got that severe thunderstorm warning over the city of Peoria in Illinois. You're looking at that right now. This storm capable of producing perhaps quarter-size hail, and it's moving off to the northeast at about 45 miles an hour or so, moving out of Peoria. We're going to have a brief break here, and then we'll come back with an update. Keep it here on Fox Weather.
Care.com makes it easy to take care of the whole family, pets included.
Repel every element with Rain-X Pro Ceramics.
on Fox Weather, of course, we've been showing you this video, and we were watching it live as Brandon Clement was in Lacona, Iowa. Of course, we're still keeping an eye on the storms. He's joining us now by phone from Victor, Iowa, where we're tracking still this tornado-warned storm. So, Brandon, we'll talk about the video here in a minute, but update us on your location and what you're seeing. I know now we don't have much light that we're dealing with.
Yeah, I'm on I-80 East at Victor, Iowa, which was just to the south side of this tornado-warned storm. I can actually see a pretty good look at it due to the lightning off in the distance. I can't get as close as I was earlier. It's just moving too fast. It's too dark. It does not appear to be down now at the time, but I'm too far away to confirm that for sure. It's still got a nice supercellular structure to it. Still got some rotation. Of course, the tornado warning is still there, so I still take this storm very seriously here in the past.
And you have myself as well as Bridget Mahoney here. But before we get to Bridget, regarding the tornado, it's been perhaps cycling just a little bit. I mean, earlier when we saw it there in Lacona, this rope tornado, that was an impressive shot and quite a structure associated with it. Did it surprise you how it looked?
No, not really, because it was really ramping up just before it was produced. I actually looked over to Jonathan Petromalo and see, I said, here it goes, it's about to start. It wasn't 20 seconds before dust kicked up and a funnel started coming down. And from that point, it took a little while to get fully condensated. But once it did, it was really moving along at about 60 miles an hour. And thankfully, I just saw it hit fields. I didn't see it hit any structures. Got close to a few, but I didn't see any.
And that's what I was going to ask you next. Have you any damage with this? I know oftentimes as the storm chasers, they go out, they get that visual confirmation. Oftentimes they try to go look if there is any damage in the vicinity. Were you able to notice any destruction with this tornado that you confirmed?
I saw some trees that were uprooted and snapped in a couple different locations. I saw some debris up in a power line in one spot, but I didn't see any structures that were hit. That were not. It's very difficult to track a storm moving that fast, even with some open fields because you have rolling hills in Iowa. But it was a very narrow tornado at the bottom. It actually had a very strong circulation at the bottom at times, but it was very narrow. So that we have a rural area and a narrow tornado. It's a very hard to hit something. That's kind of what happened tonight. It just managed to skirt around everything, thankfully. This was not far outside of Des Moines. Which is a major city, but in that area, it's still pretty rural.
And it's, between, as you mentioned, just to the east of Des Moines and west of Cedar Rapids. I mean, the storm itself is moving, Brandon, as you know, in the direction of Cedar Rapids. It looks like we've seen this severe thunderstorm warning get extended now by the Quad Cities. So they're now issuing for this storm. I mean, do you think, given the environment and the parameters, that this thing could be still capable of producing a tornado? Or are you going to hang with this one for a while?
It's really difficult to say because when you start losing your daytime heating, sometimes they'll decouple and become elevated. There's also a warm front draped somewhere right across this area, and if it's on that warm front, it could really produce a tornado fast. If it's just over it, it becomes a lot more difficult. So there's a lot of different factors going in place. All we can do is just look at the radar and take the warning seriously.
Yeah, I think that's the important call here, and it's so close to some areas where we saw just about a week ago tornadoes move through. I mean, I'm looking close to Iowa City, down in Kelowna. It's just this area. As far as what's off to the west, because we're looking at your shot there in Victor, a little closer to Cedar Rapids for perspective's sake. That's where you're still located in that vicinity. But off to the west, this line of storms, one storm's moved through Des Moines, and Brandon, that's perhaps the storms associated with the cold front, you'd say, correct?
Correct. I'm not as concerned about that, but the tornado watch is still out for a reason. Some of those storms can and occasionally do on cold fronts become tornadic, so there's definitely something to watch. And there's also still a chance for big hail. But when that line really deals and gets moving fast later on the night, I think this is going to be a big wind damage problem.
Yeah, I mean, that whole line actually extending all the way down to Kansas City, we have it warned. So we're still watching the one storm, some incredible video. I mean, did you guys, as you were watching this rope tornado there earlier in Lacona, did you guys encounter any hail, or you were on the side of the storm that, well, you weren't even in the storm. You were watching it from what, the south side, the east side?
We had a couple chunks of hail fall right in front of us. Never hit the car, about the size of golf balls, and it was for about 15 seconds, and that was it. But we tried to stay out in front of it a little bit, and the east side, and then of course it's moving so fast. Eventually, it's gonna beat you on a race 60 miles an hour when it gets to go in a straight line if you can.
And, this evening, as we continue to see the possibility of some of these storms working through portions of Iowa into Missouri, then we have to think about tomorrow, a more widespread severe weather threat farther off to the east. So are you heading east into your Wednesday? And if you are, where are you headed?
Yeah, I'm headed east right now. I'm really letting today play out. The models tend to do a lot better after they see how the convection plays out today. And it was a really difficult forecast today. So there was a lot of uncertainty with the models. So I think they'll pick up a whole lot better here in the next few hours and start giving us a better idea on where the locations may be.
And actually, Brandon, before we let you go, final question here, because there's sort of this bimodal event that we were watching, the Storm Prediction Center highlighting two areas. Was there a reason why you guys ultimately chose to track farther to the north and not stay farther south, say in Arkansas through the Missouri Ozarks tonight?
I'm not going to discount the threat in the Ozarks in that area because nighttime tornadoes are so dangerous. But there was just better forcing on that triple point, which is where the warm front, cold front, and the low sits and the dry line. So it was just better forcing right there, a little bit better turning. And my real dilemma was whether or not to chase the storm that was actually pushing into Peoria. That came basically over my hotel. So I was stuck in the middle between these two storms and finally just had to pick one. But it looked like either way it was a tornado.
Yeah, and it sounds as if you were hoping to track a tornado today. You picked the right region, at least right now, before that sun set. Seeing that one in Lacona earlier is incredible, and we're glad that at least what we've seen briefly, a little bit of damage, but everyone perhaps okay. We'll hope for the best. We'll let you go, Brandon Clement. Thank you for joining us again here on Fox Weather as he's still tracking some storms there through Victor, Iowa. We have much more straight ahead. You'll want to keep it here on Fox Weather. Another quick break. Our continuing coverage, though, will continue in just 2 minutes.
Hey, if you live near Donaldson, Hermitage, or Mount Juliet, we're so excited to invite you to the Donaldson Fellowship over Easter weekend. We have 5 opportunities for you to come and join us. You can find out all the info below, but this is an awesome opportunity for you to find community. Can't wait to see you soon.
Whether you need electrical, plumbing, or AC, you can count on Kimbrough Air. Kimbrough means comfort.
This is a Fox Weather Alert, a severe weather threat targeting millions in the central U.S. Tonight, we're already seeing storms spawn dangerous tornadoes. very large hail and winds about 70 miles an hour associated with some of these storms.
And these storms will impact over 13 states, some of which are still recovering from last week's deadly tornado outbreak.
This is a pretty expansive system, too, spanning from Michigan all the way down to Texas with some major cities in the bullseye. Tonight's biggest concern, dangerous and long-track nighttime tornadoes. We're tracking it all right now on Fox Weather. Bottom of the hour here, looking at that severe weather threat. More on that in a minute. I'm Stephen Morgan.
And I'm Bridget Mahoney. Thanks so much for joining us. Of course, if you are in the line of these storms, we want to make sure you are heeding the warnings because we've seen that ground verification of these tornadoes so far through the afternoon and evening.
Saw it right before the sun set. You and Craig tracking those as we were dealing with tornadoes in Iowa and in Illinois. So let's get to the radar right now and show you what we're dealing with, because this Fox Weather alert, rightfully so, right? As we saw this one in Lacona, we just spoke with Brandon Clement. He was watching this one in Lacona a couple of hours ago, and this storm has had a history now of producing a tornado and perhaps even doing a little bit of damage too. As far as the overall stats are concerned now, the good news is we have no tornado warnings right now. I mean, there was that brief window where we dealt with a couple of tornadoes. It was all pretty quick. And now we're dealing with just severe thunderstorm warnings. And I don't want to discount those, just severe thunderstorm warnings, because some of these storms could and have produced tornadoes. Just at the moment, they're severe warned. We have seen some impressive hail in Davenport in Osceola, 3.5 inches in diameter. Newark, Missouri, too. We're talking about around baseball-size hail, a little bit bigger than that. But as far as these 9 severe thunderstorm warnings are concerned, the population are now 8. In those warnings, about 294,000 as one of those severe thunderstorm warnings was allowed to drop or since has been expired. As far as the tornadoes, the one tornado that we were seeing out of Lacona coming out of this region, this part of Iowa, central Iowa really, and then just outside of Peoria too. Here's Peoria and where that storm is moving through right now. We briefly had confirmed tornado there as we spotted it as storm trackers were driving through. There in Sandyville and Milo, the debris reported southeast of the city there, and then that brief tornado touchdown, but it was up and down. So we saw this thing cycle just a little bit. And a lot of time, the nature of these rope-like tornadoes, not a lot of sustenance can sometimes lift pretty quickly. And a lot of times these tornadoes will take the characteristics of a rope tornado as they're sort of ending the life of the tornado. Not all the time, but that's perhaps what we saw. Just south of Macomb City in the town of Fandon, we had quarter-size hail associated with this tornado. So these were just over the past couple of hours too. And now as we're heading later into the evening, what we're seeing is a part of this tornado watch, which had been issued for parts a little farther south of Iowa into parts of Illinois, but then also south into Quincy and Springfield. That tornado watch is getting canceled or chiseled away just a little bit, slowly but surely. It's still running until 10 o'clock. So we're going to see these areas under that tornado watch until 10 o'clock. And as far as those parameters are concerned, it's large hail and a tornado. Both of those things very likely, but regarding this watch, it is a little smaller as far as square area is concerned, square mileage is concerned in the mid part of the country, the midsection. As far as the threat too, this is the other component. We had that significant threat through parts of Iowa and Illinois. That has also been dropped from the Storm Prediction Center. Now we're still carrying the significant threat farther to the south, but we're only under that very likely threat in parts of Iowa and Illinois. So this is new too, as we've seen this environment and perhaps we've seen what we're going to see in this part of the country, but that's not to be saying that we won't see anything more, hence the tornado watch that we have in effect. These are severe thunderstorm watches. So we have these running until 1 o'clock, at least the one farther to the north through parts of Wisconsin, northeastern Iowa. Large hail, damaging winds, and tornadoes, all a possibility within these watch boxes. And we also have there in the Kansas City metro a severe thunderstorm watch too. And that's because this line of storms that's moving on through, it's going to bring perhaps those damaging winds in parts of the Kansas City metro and then farther to the north. So until 1 a.m., we have that threat, and we're going to continue with this severe weather, this severe thunderstorm watch until 1 o'clock. But as far as the storms are concerned, they're still, Bridget, working off to the east.
They are, and let's track it out as we do so as we get another Fox weather alert. Kansas City, Missouri, we're looking live at you. You can see calm conditions as of now, sky conditions currently calm, but I want you to notice the flags blowing in the wind. We are going to see the winds really start to pick up over the next 30 minutes or so as we look towards downtown Kansas City. This is as these storms are marching off to the southeast. They are doing so quickly. We have a line of severe thunderstorm warnings in effect just up to the northwest of Kansas City right now. What we see on the southern side of the system, this is from Kansas City off to the south into Little Rock, Arkansas, where Glenwood, Mena, Little Rock see the level 3 or 4 threat for severe weather for the rest of the evening. Future Track will show us how it evolves from here. You'll notice a line of storms really starting to develop and amplify on the southern edge of this track. But let's look up to the north now into Kansas City, Missouri, where we were just showing you that live shot. This is a look at Kansas City there. That is where we have currently mostly dry conditions. All of this green here you see, that's what we call ground scatter. That's what's just picking up some reflectivity. It's not really raining there. This is the rain, though, back up to the northwest. That's where it's tracking off to the southeast into the next hour or so. And that's when many of these spots along I-29 going to see some of the gusty winds pick up, all because of what we call that outflow, that boundary, really a gust front that is going to be arriving because of this straight line damaging wind event. It's moving east within Kansas City. It looks like over the next 40 minutes or so. St. Joseph, 8:46 for you, a little bit closer in time frame within the next 4 minutes or so. Leavenworth a little bit later as we head closer to the top of the hour, and then you can see Shawnee likely going to arrive at 9:38. That is on the southern edge of the Kansas City metro area on the Kansas side, Shawnee, Kansas. You'll notice Kansas City, your time frame within the next hour or so. 9:40 is the timing for you, but be mindful, you are going to see some of the gusty winds arrive before we see some of the heavy rain. Also frequent lightning within this. That's where we see a lot of convection, a lot of heavy rain as it trails off to the east. So this line is just now starting to set up. This line is all in association with that cold front that we've been seeing and that we've been advertising. It is moving. Eventually this line will move through portions of Missouri down through Arkansas. And not only that, it will move east into tomorrow. We're talking the Ohio River Valley down through Kentucky, Tennessee, going to see their next chance of severe weather.
And we've been showing you some video out of Iowa, also into Illinois. This was in Lewistown, Illinois, a little earlier. Brad Arnold with Live Storms Media was tracking this tornado as it moved through. There are some reports of damage as this tornado tore through the town of Lewistown. So let's bring in our next guest from Lewistown. In fact, the alderman there, Jim Long. Alderman Long, thank you for joining us. From what I understand, you've been looking at some of the damage. Now it's nighttime, perhaps a little different, but what are you seeing out there, or what have you seen out there earlier this evening before the sunset?
Well, just in my investigation, out on the west edge of town and north of town, we have some farmhouses and farm buildings destroyed or partially destroyed. No report of serious injuries, but I just spoke to the police chief, and there's a few injuries reported. In the town itself, we've got nothing major that I'm aware of as far as damage. We've got a lot of limbs and power lines, and luckily I don't believe anybody's injured severely that I know of. I haven't been able to contact a lot of people because everybody's going different directions, but we got lucky. It missed us by maybe a mile and went around the west and northwest and north end of our town. So, but we got some limbs and a few things down, and some damages worse than others, but we got lucky.
You got lucky, yeah. Aside from a couple of those perhaps properties, farmers having to deal with a little bit of damage on their land. In fact, when this thing was coming through, there were eyes on it, seeing it. Alderman, what were you doing? Did you go through this storm? I mean, whereabouts in Lewistown? You had mentioned it's the west side and the north side of Lewistown proper that this storm moved through. Did you by chance get a view of it?
No, but we had a friend that lived down the street. My granddaughter and boyfriend and my wife and myself were home, and we were down the basement. And a younger neighbor was outside looking. He seen the funnel cloud, but he didn't have his phone with him. And then another gentleman on the east side of town took a photo of it, and it was a lot bigger than just a normal tornado. It was a real wide body on the ground. So when he took the picture, but as soon as everything cleared, well, then I come out here to see what's going on.
And we're, as you're talking to us, Alderman, we're looking at some of the damage. Perhaps it looks like maybe one of those irrigation systems, perhaps a sprinkler. It does look like it was a farmland, a couple of structures, as you had mentioned, perhaps significant damage, if not a total loss. It's good to know no fatalities and just injuries. As far as power, the situation right now, you had mentioned power lines are down. Is the town of Lewistown okay? Is it mainly just off to the west there? And then farther to the north, what is it, Depler or Deepler Springs?
Yes, that's where it's dark. We've got a main high line on the highway north of town. That's poles and everything are down on the highway, and the crews are out there now. And some trees across the highway, and people are working on that. So we're pitching it and getting it done.
Going to get to work pretty quickly, too. I mean, we're about 8:45 or so Central Time there. Things are already dark. I mean, describe this storm. You guys are southwest of Peoria. This storm eventually rolled into Peoria there. Did it seem as if this storm came upon you guys pretty quickly, or were you watching it, knew, had a little bit of a warning, a lead time associated with it?
No, we had good lead time. It didn't sneak up on us. But it wasn't like everybody talks about hearing a tornado, and the train sound. This one was quiet. I talked to the families out west of town that lost their house, and he'd been through, this was the second time his house has been damaged by a tornado in the last probably 15 years. And he said the first one you could hear it coming, but this one, it was quiet. He didn't hear anything, but when the sirens went off, well, they just went to the basement, and they're lucky that they did. So we had good lead time.
They knew what to do. That's good. I think that sometimes a lot of Midwesterners from the St. Louis area, that tendency to go outside instead of going to the basement, and perhaps you can relate. It's good that advice was taken, though, because it's what we suggest and encourage all the time. As far as that storm as it moved through, I mean, what do? You have insurance? Is the farmer going to be okay? You said you spoke directly to them?
Yes, they're retired farmers, but he's not worried about it. He's just glad everybody. It's just him and his wife, and they're happy to be walking around. So they just take it and go on with life. That's all you do.
Yeah, it's what you have to do. But what are the chances that you get two different tornadoes moving through your property in the matter of 15 years? Some people go a whole lifetime and never experience a tornado. Hate that happened, but hey, belongings can be replaced, as you know. Lives can't be. So it's good that they're okay. Well, Alderman, we appreciate you joining us and wish you guys the best of luck. It's good to hear that it wasn't a direct hit for Lewistown, but still sad that there were a few properties. Wish you guys the best in the recovery.
Okay, well, God was looking out for us because we're in pretty good shape compared to what some people are. So thanks for your time.
Valid point. Alderman Jim Long there in the town of Lewistown, which is at least dealt with a little bit of damage, Bridget. It's good to hear, though, and good
Right.
that folks there can count their blessings tonight.
And it's crazy to hear, the comparisons, because that's what many of these communities had to do. We think about portions like Rolling Fork, Little Rock, Arkansas. All of these areas have seen extensive damage over the last 2 weeks. There's a possibility of even more damage through this evening with this system. Severe thunderstorm watches, these are new. They were posted now for a little bit farther off to the south, the southern side of the system, including Oklahoma. I will note, not including Oklahoma City. This cold front is starting to really get its bearings, and that's where it is cutting across, and that is where it's going to produce the potential of not only straight line damaging winds, but also a few isolated tornadoes on the east side of the frontal system. You'll notice this threat. This is the northern tier, and this is what's really been firing up early through the afternoon and still through the evening. But the southern side, we're kind of on pause as of right now, but on pause doesn't mean we won't see it will evolve. It will through the rest of this evening as the cold front cuts across and marches off to the east. As it does so, the reason being this southern edge, why we haven't seen some development through the afternoon, all because of what we talk about, a cap in our environment. We're on the southern edge of the system. What we have within the atmosphere, as you rise up, higher up into the atmosphere, what normally happens? Well, temperatures normally get colder, but within this atmosphere overhead of Arkansas, what we are seeing is actually warmer air aloft. So that's what we call an inversion layer within our atmosphere. So warm air aloft, what is it doing? It's actually preventing storms to rise and really develop within our atmosphere because we have that cap in place. Once that erodes, which we suspect it will through the nighttime hours as temperatures cool, that will eliminate this warm, dry air aloft. What will happen then is the storms will burst through the cap and rise up within the atmosphere, and that's when they can grow higher up into the atmosphere, and that is when we can see more vertical development, meaning more severe weather. What we have ahead of this is actually a very good indication of the cap involved. This is where we see more of that stratiform rain. That's that kind of low-level rain, and it really doesn't develop. That's an indication of some of that cap. But watch as we head through the evening. Look at that rogue storm developing through central portions of Oklahoma. The cap erodes, and we start to see the potential of a few of these isolated storms. We watch out for those, and then eventually the cold front comes through, and that's where we'll see more widespread severe weather. Not only that, some pockets of heavier rain with the possibility of some flood-like conditions. The potential is there once we see these systems in this system really provide the potential of more severe weather. The possibility of tornadoes are there. Fayetteville, Fort Smith, Little Rock. Less than a week ago, you saw that EF3 tornado confirmed. So cleanup efforts are ongoing, but we see a pause, of course, into the nighttime hours like you normally do. But again, we think about some of the debris that is still loose. Even a gusty wind can transport some of that. So a big concern into the rest of the evening. Of course, you are watching Fox Weather live, continuing coverage of tonight's severe weather outbreak. We're tracking dangerous storms moving across the center of the country. This is a look at our live Fox Weather alert system. We see new severe thunderstorm warnings, numerous in nature. We'll continue to track this system with live radar updates. That's coming up after the break.
This can't be right.
Trouble with your taxes? I'm April. You know,
have been dropping too through the 30s and the 20s, now down to 19 degrees this evening in Dickinson with that snow. Bismarck getting that snow. Fargo 28 degrees and snow. Rapid City 20 degrees too, dealing with the snow. But not too far away and some slightly warmer air. That means Minneapolis is still stuck in the rain. As far as a severe weather threat, it's clear to see where we've had those storms develop and a couple of nasty supercells that have produced tornadoes. One in Iowa this evening and another one in Illinois. But all of these lift off to the north, these being the rain, will continue with that warm wedge with this system. But that cold air, it is going to win out, especially as that cold front moves on through. And it's clear to see where that cold front's located, right? Here's the other component too, the winds. I had mentioned that east wind out of Duluth. Sustained at 40 miles an hour, gusting to 68 miles an hour. That is a significant wind gust. That's a damaging wind gust. In fact, it could do some damage. And then we head to Bismarck, too. Those winds now out of the north at 28 miles an hour. And Duluth, Minnesota, which recently had the strongest wind gust that we see on the map there, also seeing some fresh powder as this storm moves on through. Fox Weather's Brandy Campbell spoke with residents and filed this report from Duluth.
Well, while it is officially spring, winter is not done with the Midwest. Some places under a blizzard warning. Here in Duluth, we're under a winter storm warning, and it is delivering everything. We've got snow, we've got sleet, and even graupel. It looks like Dippin' Dots mixed in here. But it's not that enjoyable when you couple it with the wind. Actually, at some times, it's actually uncomfortable. But what can we expect? Well, we could get snow accumulations between 1 to 3 inches, wind gusts up to 60 miles per hour. And at some points, we could have temporary blizzard conditions. We've spoken to some people in the area to get their opinion on this weather at this time of the year.
Right now I'm over it, but always, I mean, I like the snow when it starts, but like this time of year, come on, it's literally spring. It needs to be gone now. I'm ready for planting the garden, flowers, walking around the lake without having to worry about slipping on the ice.
We've had enough. It can just blow itself out and be gone. It'd be just wonderful.
It's been an awful winter. It's been long. It's been more snow than we've ever seen. And this spring ice it just doesn't go away.
Do you have any concerns for the drive home?
No, just go slow. If the sanding and salting trucks are out, the highways are going to be fine. It's the side streets, that have the ice cover on them. Parking lots are extremely icy.
All right, tonight we are expecting sleet to go ahead and mix in with the snow, and we could also have ice accumulations up to a 1/4 inch in this area. Reporting here in Duluth, Minnesota, I'm Brandy Campbell, Fox Weather.
Brutal conditions up to the north, also off to the south. This is where we have a Fox Weather alert with a severe thunderstorm warning as far south as Texas now. This warning zone in effect for Medina County, Texas, 9:30. I want you to notice San Antonio in the line of this storm. This is issued because of destructive hail. That's where the National Weather Service tagging this as tennis ball to even baseball hail as this is lifting up to the northeast. We'll watch out for San Antonio, and you can see the vertical development within this storm system. We'll be right back after the break.
I need the greatest basketball shoe that's ever been made.
Who's the player?
Michael Jordan.
Fox Weather Alert, a severe weather threat targeting millions in the central U.S. Tonight, we're already seeing storms spawn dangerous tornadoes, very large hail, and 70-mile-an-hour plus winds. Also a threat with these storms.
And these storms will impact over 13 states, some of which are still recovering from last week's deadly tornado outbreak.
It's dark but dangerous tonight. This is an expansive system spanning from Michigan all the way down into Texas, with some major cities in the bullseye. Tonight's biggest concern, dangerous long-track nighttime tornadoes. We're tracking it all right now here on Fox Weather. Our coverage continuing all night long. Welcome on in. I'm Stephen Morgan.
And I'm Bridget Mahoney. Thanks so much for joining us. If you're in the line of these storms, some areas, especially the southern communities, have been in kind of that waiting, that holding pattern, but that will change overnight tonight.
We still have that significant risk down there, too. The Storm Prediction Center within the last hour, updating that and lessening the threat farther to the north where we've already seen tornadoes. We still have that level 4 threat farther south.
And off to the south, we're just starting to see really the initiation of some of these cells. That's through Texas. Very close by to San Antonio, we have a new severe thunderstorm warning in effect for baseball-sized hail.
2.75 inches if you want that measurement of baseballs. And in San Antonio, what we're dealing with, same system, we've got a dry line. This dry line, it's notorious in parts of Texas. We have some very dry, even warmer air on the backside of that front, but ahead of it, we have that unstable air. So in San Antonio, we'll be watching it. This storm actually moving pretty fast. That forward motion at about 55 miles an hour. You see where it's located in Medina County, Texas, and it's heading right up I-35. Any folks driving along I-35 when we have this destructive tag associated with a severe thunderstorm warning, that will shatter a windshield. So it's best not to be driving at the moment as this particular storm is producing some significant hail. Radar is indicating, of course, the hail size. We can estimate that tennis ball size hail. So tennis balls, baseballs, real similar as far as that. It's destructive hail no matter how you look at it. Not a tornadic threat with this storm, but it is moving in the direction of San Antonio. So the heads up that it'll eventually get into San Antonio. It might be at the bottom of the hour, might not be until maybe a little closer to 45 minutes after the top of the hour. There we go. San Antonio at about 9:49. If this storm holds together, some destructive hail on the way in San Antonio. But right now, a lot of that hail is falling perhaps in Medina County, just to the southwest of Devine. That storm, though, itself, as far as the updraft is concerned, the vertical development, I mean, consider those vertical winds that we're talking about that could sustain a piece of ice the size of baseballs. I mean, that's a strong vertical wind, right? So we have quite a profile when we're looking there in the third dimension of this system and this particular storm. So that updraft's a healthy one. A lot of times when we talk about some storms along a dry line, it's hail that these are known for. Also, we could see these storms produce tornadoes. That's not what we're seeing this evening, though. In Moore, Texas, as I had mentioned, a little farther northeast, right along I-35, eventually moving in to Devine, we've got some destructive hail. Look at this thing, though. It's all by itself. It's a loner just southwest of San Antonio, but it'll continue to work off to the east-northeast, not something that's fueled by this, daylight, as we have seen the sunset a couple of hours ago. Meanwhile, we have a cold front. So as we're working through this system, there's a couple of things that we'll be watching. The line of storms associated with this cold front slicing right through parts of Kansas right now. That's moving through from St. Joe down to Atchison, Leavenworth, Topeka, Kansas, too. Checking in on the threat, we've got damaging winds, perhaps about 60 miles an hour or so, and quarter-size hail. There's no doubt that these storms are going to move through Kansas City. The big question is how severe will these storms be as they move through Casey-Mo? We'll have to see just how intense they are, but it doesn't look like these are going to pose that tornadic threat, which is some good news. We have a severe thunderstorm watch in effect. It appears that maybe we'll just deal with the damaging winds and perhaps some hail, probably not the size of baseballs, but we'll watch to see how this environment evolves. But this is associated, as I mentioned, with that cold front that's moving on through that area of low pressure well to the north there. And you see when it'll arrive into Kansas City, Kansas by 9:52, Kansas City, Missouri by about 9:56, Olathe and then Lenexa, they're a little closer to the top of the hour. So And this thing does have enough energy. I don't think we're going to see this line dissipate. And the extent of the line, it is warned all the way from Savannah south, just to the north of Emporia. So moving off to the east and making that approach to Kansas City. So got a couple, probably about less than an hour, in Kansas City if you want to enjoy the weather right now. We have seen that severe thunderstorm watch. It's been expanded farther to the south and also extended. When we look at time, it goes until 3 o'clock Central Time. This is for Independence, Kansas, Tulsa, Edmond. So it's this zone where we have that new severe thunderstorm watch. And then farther to the north, the one that runs until 12 o'clock for St. Joe, KC, that goes until midnight local time. But associated with this severe weather threat that we have, this severe thunderstorm watch, a tornado will be possible, damaging winds and large hail. That thin line of storms is what we're watching pretty carefully just to see how this thing is going to be moving on through. And they are moving, so we'll eventually see that work on through. But as far as the threats concerned, the biggest threat here will be associated with that line of storms. And we'll probably see that line of storms lengthen farther to the south. And as that occurs, we'll see places like in northern Oklahoma come into better focus, and why we'll have that severe thunderstorm watch. Perhaps we're not seeing it immediately, but Bridget, those storms are going to develop even here in the evening. It's exactly what those indications appeared to be when we were looking at stuff this morning.
Right. It's likely to be expanded even more so from there. Let's check in on Des Moines, Iowa. This is a live look where you can see what's happening very clearly. Frequent lightning strikes within the vicinity, all because of some of these cells that have been developing through central Iowa, lifting up to the northeast. So far, Iowa, you have seen a couple of confirmations of those tornadoes with the supercell in activity. We saw one just off to the southeast of Des Moines. That is where we saw in Lacona that rope tornado. We still keep this tornado watch through 10 o'clock this evening. So another hour on this watch zone. But you'll notice Missouri, you're kind of shedded off from that watch. But farther off to the southwest, that is where, or the northeast from this point, that is where we have the severe thunderstorm warning. We also have a severe thunderstorm watch in effect farther off to the southwest. There's that watch that I was mentioning until 10 o'clock this evening. We look southwest. This is what I'm talking about in terms of the watches going into effect for Oklahoma into Kansas, as well as the western half of Missouri, all because of this cold front that is trailing off to the east. That's where we see that. And then also into Arkansas, we have this concern of the cap eroding where we could see some rotation. Let's time it out for you. As you notice on the northern tier, it's developing, and this is what we've seen so far through this evening. We're watching this more well-defined line develop, and once we see that, our concern kind of rotates and turns into more of that straight line wind damaging effect. And you'll notice with Future Track tomorrow morning, St. Louis, look at 7 a.m. up to the northwest of you at 7 a.m. 7 a.m. through about 9 a.m. That's when the storms are going to work through the St. Louis metro area before they work into the Ohio River Valley later on in your Wednesday afternoon. What you notice on the backside of the system, clearing skies like Kansas City through tomorrow afternoon. By lunchtime, you should see the sunshine. Stephen.
And I wish we could say the same for our friends in, say, Ohio. We've got these storms, Bridget, that are going to be moving on through. And as far as our Wednesday is concerned, there is an increased risk, a heightened risk, that level 3 out of 5 now in effect for the Tennessee, Ohio River Valleys as these storms march off to the east. And we're looking at Detroit's forecast there as we head into the afternoon. Perhaps we'll be dealing with some storms around 10 o'clock. We might deal with a couple of waves in Detroit, but also the severe weather threat. Waking up in the morning, there's probably going to be an early morning severe weather threat as these storms work through, let's say, Indiana, eastern Illinois. And then the afternoon will likely recharge some of these storms as they push off to the east, eventually getting into places like western PA and eventually New York, say like Buffalo. But that very likely threat that we have, it does include Detroit up into Grand Rapids. I mean, this severe threat it's pretty far north, right? Getting into those higher latitudes and going to affect areas where winter has very much been on the table as recent as just last week. But this is going to be that severe weather threat that we see farther to the north. As this overall system has been a little slower to progress and develop, for the day on Wednesday, we've seen this severe weather threat increasing, and that's exactly what we have. I mean, the entire state of Indiana under that very likely threat tomorrow, and a lot of it will begin in the early morning hours, say around 6 or 7 o'clock. These storms are going to be marching off to the east, and throughout the day, they'll be encompassing these areas that we have the greatest threat. But it is quite expansive. Talk about a lot of real estate from Memphis all the way up into Grand Rapids. We have a level 2 threat for Buffalo. In western PA, it's also that level 2 threat. So a lot of life still left with this system, even though it's just beginning, and we have yet to see some of the stuff develop that's going to likely, over the next couple of hours, develop in places like northern Louisiana and Arkansas. To the north on Wednesday, though, in Michigan, northern Indiana, Ohio, we have that threat for some of these storms to produce tornadoes. So we can essentially shift what we're watching in Iowa and Illinois this evening farther to the east to include places like Chicago. Initially, we'll have that threat in Chicago, but as we go through the day Wednesday, that will get chiseled away, and we'll watch that core threat focus farther to the east in Grand Rapids, Fort Wayne, and then eventually into Detroit. But the potential is there that through Michigan, northern Indiana, Ohio, we could see these storms turn severe and produce some strong tornadoes. Not out of the question. So we'll keep that in mind. This warm air continues to surge to the north, and as it does surge onto the north, it's going to be tapping into the moisture, and we'll have to see the nature of these storms. Perhaps there will be a line of storms that perhaps bow out just a bit, producing some damaging winds that move through central Illinois. As they do so, it's within that line that we might deal with a tornado or two. They'll make that approach afternoon in Detroit, but we get a little bit of destabilization that occurs because of daylight and surface heating. And so as those storms work through Detroit, say around 1 or 2 o'clock, that's when we should eventually see things improve. Once afternoon, we see the storms move on out. We'll still carry that threat, though, for seeing some of these storms a little stronger farther to the south of Detroit, as that cold front, it's slower to move the farther south you head. But in Buffalo, too, our time around 6 o'clock Central Time, so we're saying 7 o'clock or so local time in Buffalo, maybe 5, 6 o'clock, we'll see those storms work through Pittsburgh eventually, and then we finally have some quiet time. And here's the final thing, aside from the strong tornadoes that we could deal with, Bridget, it's that same threat, an enhanced threat for hail that could be the size of eggs or so. That's far north, too. I mean, we're talking a little closer to the UP of Michigan, the whole mitt essentially under that threat of Michigan.
Very widespread threat yet again. We have new video now into Fox Weather. This is coming in out of that tornado warned storm where we see this tornado on the ground. It's Lewistown, Illinois, where we have been tracking this system. That's where we were updating you live in terms of on the ground conditions. Stephen, in fact, you actually talked with an alderman in Lewistown. His name was Jim Long, where he was kind of describing some of the damage on the ground. He was mentioning many people in the community. They are just happy. You know, they're okay, but there's still some damage to be found.
Yeah, he was talking about a couple retired farmers, and the man and his wife. They were both 15 years ago dealing with the same sort of damage from a tornado that moved through, and so getting hit twice. Not great. And in Lewistown, Illinois, what we saw lately, and the alderman, he did say no fatalities. There were a few injuries, and hopefully that those people who were injured are okay. But he also described this tornado, which was fascinating, Bridget, as quiet compared to the storm about 15 years ago.
Right. Interestingly enough, and this is a look rolling through. You can see kind of the development of this cell. You initially see this funnel. What you'll notice, kind of some dust, some debris whipping up from some of the outflow that we're seeing within this. And then you can see it kind of lowering down to the ground initially, and that's what created for some of this rotation. I know some of the strongest part of the storm actually lifted just slightly up to the north of Lewistown, at least the town area, but you can see how this storm kind of evolved over even a matter of 30 seconds. And what you'll also notice, quite a few people out there on the roads. That's always of concern when we're tracking these storms. We want to let people know you get out of your vehicle if you see a storm like this approaching. Of course, some of those people could have been storm chasers. Additional video, this is Lewistown. This is more of a clear-cut imagery. Actually, this is in Pleasantville, Iowa, where we saw that rope tornado. I think this was likely very close to Lakota as well, where you can see some of the dust and debris. This is a little bit, Stephen, of a more elevated storm than what we saw in the warm sector of this system. But it shows you, no matter what, it's a powerful storm.
Yeah, it is. And sometimes it's impressive. I mean, those tornadoes, they take on that white color, right? And it's all about just the lighting. I mean, sometimes you're able to get that funnel to completely condense, and so it's basically a cloud, and it's of course at the surface producing debris. But that previous video that we were just looking at, Bridget, that one looked darker. That was messy. In fact, it was perhaps a bit transparent initially, but it's all about the lighting. But sometimes you see those rope tornadoes, and they might be weaker, but some of them can be very strong. And so even though they're smaller, doesn't mean that they're weaker ones.
Right, not to be discounted. And again, you talk about the visibility there through the nighttime hours tonight. That is going to be hard to find because overnight hours, nocturnal tornadoes, harder to get that ground verification. Medina, Minnesota, farther to the north of this system, you can see some hail, some snow embedded in with these severe thunderstorms, and you notice the snow on the ground. And then farther west of there, that is where we have the blizzard-like conditions. So a lot going on within our atmosphere. Let's check in on some of the tornado reports that we've seen. We've seen this one off to the southeast of Des Moines. That's in Lakota, where we were just showing you that video. That was more of that rope tornado. Luckily, it did track through rural areas, but still, we have to be mindful of the farmers. Any of those small town communities seeing the possibility of debris and some of that destruction. We zoom in here. This is Sandyville as well as Milo. That's where we have some of the debris reported southeast of Milo. Also, that confirmation of that tornado touchdown. It was up and down. It was really quick. When we see those rope tornadoes, oftentimes they can lift up and drop down a little bit quicker than what we would normally see in maybe a wedge tornado that strengthens a little bit longer and holds that intensity. We look into the east from Iowa into Fandin, Illinois. That's where we've seen reports of a tornado. Not only that, quarter-size hail, very close to Vermont as well, west of Vermont. That's where we were talking to Brad Arnold as he was tracking that storm in that vicinity, and we got that ground verification from his imagery. So far today, this is really incredible, where we look at Davenport, Iowa. That's where we've indicated softball size hail, 4 inches in diameter, 2.75 inches, Boulder Hill, Illinois. Baseball size hail, Troy Grove, Illinois, 2.5, just really extensive for so many of these communities. Oftentimes, you know, we talk about straight line winds as well as tornadoes doing some of the most damage. But when you think about hail damage, it's always extensive, especially once you get up to tennis ball size hail, and we've seen quite a bit of that so far this afternoon into the evening, especially if you're driving out there on the interstates, the highways. It can do even more damage as you're traveling at a faster rate of speed. Widespread reports so far, 159 reports so far. This number you see right here, that will be going up through the nighttime hours into tomorrow morning as we expect not only more severe thunderstorm warnings, possibly more tornado warnings through the night tonight. Of course, you are watching Fox Weather Live. Continuing coverage of tonight's severe storm threat continues after the break. That's where we track dangerous storms moving across the center portion of the country. We're also going to talk to a storm chaser. That's coming up next.
Bruce Willis nega John Travolta. Paradise City, Rock Kulnoa.
Okay, cut it.
Ray Magliozzi here. When you need parts, eBay Motors ensures a guaranteed fit. Let's see, you'll need headlights and a bumper. At least you can skip the car wash. Just go to eBay Motors. The check means a guaranteed fit. Let's ride.
with a Fox Weather alert and IPAVA. We were looking at earlier Brad Arnold shooting some of this video, a concerning trend as we watch this tornado develop. And again, this was in IPAVA. In fact, we have Brad Arnold on the phone. He's right now in El Paso. Of course, these storms have been moving off to the east. It recently moved through Peoria, Illinois. Brad, as far as what you're seeing right now, where you're at, are things quiet? Or are you just sort of sitting and waiting right now?
Yeah, things have finally calmed down. Those storms that we were on, those tornado-producing supercells, they have now crossed over that warm front. So a lot of that energy that they were tapping into earlier, it's a lot cooler above the warm front. So things have kind of calmed down here in Illinois for the night. We still have another thunderstorm warning by Chicago, though, so we'll need to keep an eye on it. But as far as where I'm at, near the Peoria area, Bloomington area, it has calmed down significantly from where it was just a couple of hours ago.
Brad, I was talking to you earlier a couple hours ago as you were kind of chasing in the Lewistown area where we saw some of that destruction out of that previous tornado. Now you mentioned things calming down. So can you kind of describe to our viewers what is happening within our atmosphere? You mentioned these storms lifting north of the warm front or into the cooler sector. So, you know, how is this changing the atmosphere for the rest of the evening?
Yeah, so as these storms continue to push north and northeast, they will cross over that warm front, which is draped over northern Illinois into Iowa, and that was our main ignition for these tornado-producing supercells that they would latch onto that warm front and track across it. So once everything crosses over that warm front, the dynamics just aren't there. You could have for tornadoes at least, you can still have some large hail, some damaging straight line winds, which people in Chicago need to be watching out for right now. But that tornado threat is extremely low once it crosses over that main warm front.
You know what's wild is earlier this afternoon, Brad, Chicago had a severe thunderstorm warning as we had a line of storms work through in the afternoon. Now we're dealing with the second round. That video out of IPAVA, I mean, that was concerning because that storm was heading to and moved eventually over Peoria where we had that tornado warning.
Right.
But you also, didn't you drive through Lewistown? We spoke to one of the aldermen there, Alderman Jim Long, and he said that there were a couple of structures, perhaps farming homes and maybe a barn that was damaged. That's consistent with what you saw in Lewistown, right, when you strolled upon it?
When we went directly through Lewistown, we actually got on Highway US 24. So where we thought the damage was going to be, there was no damage. It sounds like the main damage may have been just north of the city, probably somewhere in between Cuba and Lewistown, right there, those small towns. So I didn't see actually any damage in the city or in downtown of Lewistown. So it was probably a little bit further north.
Actually, that's what the alderman said. It was just to the north of Lewistown. They dodged a bullet, and just to the west too of Lewistown. I guess there were just a couple of farms there. He said no fatalities. Power was out. I think that the town of Lewistown fared mostly okay. Fascinating too. He had said that a couple of 15 years ago they dealt with a tornado. Speak to your location. I think when we're looking at the severe weather threat, is it a little early to be this far north in Illinois or right on schedule? I mean, when we're talking about this season, spring's off to a very active start this year.
Yeah, climatology speaking, it should really be over the Dixie Alley area. So this is a little bit early for this area, but it's not completely unheard of. We have had some violent tornadoes that have come through Illinois in April. So it's not completely unheard of. Typically you need some type of warm front to be able to get those really going up here. But typically we see the large scale events typically happen in the lower Mississippi Valley. For whatever reason, we've had back-to-back big events though up in the Iowa, Illinois, even in the Indiana area as well. So
Mother Nature just not playing by the rules in 2023. We, think back to February. It was an active month then in March and now into April. So as we fast forward into the next 24 hours, of course, this severe threat is spreading off to the east. Are you going to chase into tomorrow, especially around, the Ohio River Valley, also the Mitten of Michigan? That's where we have that hatched area for tornadoes. Are you traveling into your Wednesday?
we may be heading east tonight to chase tomorrow. Really going to dive into models here in the next hour or two as we try to figure out where we're going to stay tonight, just to kind of decide if we are chasing tomorrow, and second, if we're chasing, where we need to set up. That we haven't made a decision just yet, but I'll look at models here in about an hour or so and kind of decide that area. But we would definitely need to get a little bit further east for that main threat of possibly significant tornadoes tomorrow.
And Brad, I'd asked earlier one of your colleagues about the threat and this bimodal threat you had mentioned, two severe weather threats in the north, also in the south down into Arkansas.
Right.
As far as your decision to chase farther to the north, what ultimately made you pull the trigger and chase or track in this region?
Ultimately, it was really two things. First off, you had terrain. Up here in Iowa and Illinois, it is very, very flat. You have a very nice road network. It's very gridded, so that way you pretty much can go in any direction that you want to. Further down south in Arkansas, you're going to be battling the Ozarks, so that's another thing. It's not as flat. You're going to have a lot of hills, mountains, trees. Even if there is a tornado, it makes it very hard to visually see it, and that's kind of dangerous, especially. Also, the threat down in Arkansas and in that area really looks to be after. Obviously after the sun goes down, so it's mainly a nocturnal event into the overnight and early morning hours over there. So that's why we made that decision to come up north.
Can be a bit of a mess, and perhaps we were looking, the Storm Prediction Center mentioning perhaps we'll get a watch here within the next hour or two farther to the south, because it does look like it's going to be one of those evenings where it's active, unfortunately, in a place that has been hit so hard. Well, Brad Arnold, good to talk to you. Thanks for joining us and for tracking this tornado earlier this evening. We were able to get that message out and perhaps sparing some lives just west of Lewistown as they went to their basement. That's what the alderman told us. Appreciate it tonight.
Absolutely. Thanks, guys.
All right. And, of course, we're going to continue to follow the threat. We're going to take a quick break here. Severe thunderstorm warnings on our alert system this evening. A handful. They extend from Kansas to Illinois. A line of storms moving through Kansas and Iowa as we speak. Full update here in just a couple of minutes. Keep it here on Fox Weather. This is a Fox weather alert, a severe weather threat targeting millions in the central U.S. Tonight, we're already seeing storms spawn dangerous tornadoes, very large hail, and 70-mile-an-hour plus winds, all associated with these storms tearing through.
Yeah, and these storms will impact over 13 states, some of which are still recovering from last week's deadly tornado outbreak.
This is a pretty expansive system, too. It spans all the way from Michigan down to Texas with some major cities in the bullseye. Tonight's biggest concern, dangerous, long-track nighttime tornadoes. And we're tracking it all right now on Fox Weather. Bottom of the hour here. Welcome on in. A late night for a lot of folks. I'm Stephen Morgan.
And I'm Craig Herrera. Late night. We will be here with you every step of the way. Thanks for watching us right here on Fox Weather.
As far as those threats, you and Bridget tracked those tornadoes as they developed right before sunset.
Before sunset, timing was everything. We saw a large tornado. You saw that rope tornado as well. And confirmation out there, which led us to, the National Weather Service saying, hey, this is now a confirmed tornado. And one of them was labeled PDS.
Yeah.
A really dangerous situation.
And a good lead time, too, because we talked to some folks in Lewistown, Illinois, that they were able to take shelter. So very important stuff. And now this evening, that threat looks like it's going to be ramping up in the south.
Here we go.
Arkansas, Louisiana.
Right. And south, you were talking about the chance for that tornado watch to be issued. About 80% chance or so. Once it is, we'll bring it to you.
Going to be a long night for some. Let's get to the radar here at the bottom of the hour because we have a handful of severe thunderstorm warnings. But I guess you could say the devil's in the details tonight because the sun has set. The threat through let's say Iowa and in specifically Des Moines, that's going to be diminishing because we actually have perhaps a cold front working through Des Moines as we speak. This line of storms that we've been watching out to the west as it pushes farther to the east, we're seeing some clearing behind it, right? It's better in Sioux City and Omaha, just a little cooler, but still some storms. And also what we have to pay attention to, these individual storms too that have been developing. One just to the outside of Chicago. That's a little closer to the warm front and really an area where the storm trackers with Live Storms Media, we've been talking to them this evening, where they've been following. They're getting a little closer to where the air is a little cooler and the dynamics not all that great. But just outside of Chicago, we are dealing with the severe thunderstorm warning, a portion of Kane County in Illinois. It runs until the top of the hour, so we have it here for the next 27 minutes or so. This area earlier this afternoon actually dealing with some storms that moved through the Windy City, and now we're dealing with another round. And it's oftentimes the case when we deal with these dynamic spring systems, it's not just one round of storms and then we're done. In fact, Chicago could have a pretty long night as far as those threats for storms. We have to get this cold front through Chicago. It'll eventually happen, but the threat for even tornadoes very much on the table as we head into the overnight hours. So having a loud way to receive alerts important wherever you are in Illinois tonight. These storms are approaching Kansas City. It might be taking a little bit of time. They are moving off to the east, northeast. And as they develop, this line has been expanding farther to the south, but focusing in on these severe thunderstorm warnings, Buchanan County in Missouri, right in St. Joe, up into Savannah. These are all west and north of the Kansas City metro, down into Atchison, Kansas, Leavenworth, Lawrence, Topeka. The storms have cleared Topeka, Andrew County, Missouri. And as they do push off to the east, northeast, they'll be producing the gusty winds, damaging winds, perhaps 60 miles an hour, and maybe some small hail, maybe up to the size of quarters. Farther to the south, we're already seeing that development take place, and we have this part of Kansas as well as Oklahoma roughly drawn on here under a severe thunderstorm watch. It runs until 3 o'clock in the morning. But then we head farther south, and this is the zone that we'll have to watch this evening. Perhaps it might be a bit delayed. There were indications this morning that this might be off to a bit of a delayed start. And now we're, a couple of hours since sunset and still waiting on some of these storms to develop. And what we hate is that we're talking about a state that has been devastated. I mean, there's the town of Wynne, Arkansas, Little Rock as well, which just a couple of days ago hit so hard by that destructive tornado as it moved through. Interstate 30 seems to be that line where we're seeing these storms develop. Nothing severe right now, but these storms are working through, but we could be seeing this environment get a little primed for some severe weather as we head into the next couple of hours. So we'll carefully watch that right along Hope into Prescott, Arkadelphia, Malvern. This line of storms, Craig, that we're dealing with right now, not severe, producing a lot of lightning, but this zone, one of those areas that we are watching carefully.
Yeah, and you talk about all that lightning. Boy, quite a bit of energy infected with that. In fact, as we take a look at this area here, Storm Prediction Center is saying we've got about an 80% chance that we will get a tornado watch issued for the Arklatex area there. Does include quite a few areas, including Little Rock. Little Rock just getting over the storms we had on Friday night into Saturday. This goes all the way down into Shreveport. You see those storms are starting to fire off. This was the area we were watching earlier where we had a cap, an inversion, warm air up above. That is starting to perhaps erode. And there is some indication on radar that those updrafts are starting to deepen and are building. And if they build, then you've got the chance for these storms to develop and become severe. As you look at the storm thread here for the area, very likely level 3 that we're looking at to see some of these storms develop. And that's going to be well up into the area we've been watching. And then we go down to the south. Here's this level 4 that we've been watching. This is significant all the way from Branson right down into Clinton and into just outside of Little Rock. But Fort Smith is included in that. Right as that cold front starts to advance. Now, what happened is we've got that inversion, right? That cap, that hot air or that warmer air right above there. Doesn't let a lot of the cold air escape. If you've heard this in this part of the country, you know what we're talking about. If you live out west and you talk about an inversion, you're talking about a capping that traps a lot of the fog down at the surface. Another example, just to give you an illustration of what's going on. All of that cold air is starting to lift and break through this, and as it does so, it helps to erode that cap. Once that cap is gone, it's like basically taking a baseball cap off of your head, and all of that heat gets to escape, right? And that's going to cause some of these storms to develop. So as we watch this closely, here's what's going on. Future track, we'll go at 10 p.m. this evening. Notice Little Rock. You got a couple of these clusters starting to develop, and they'll continue to advance off right with that cold front. You've got all that cold air, or that humid air rather, and warm air in place. And then just outside of that, we've been talking about all those gusty winds, that dry line coming off of eastern New Mexico and West Texas, right? North Texas as well. Then take a look at this. You've almost got 2 lines set up over portions of Oklahoma City, well up into the north. And then down to the south, you've got another cluster developing just outside of the Dallas metro. Then everything comes together. You've got one big line that advances over a good chunk of Arkansas. This is now 11 o'clock tomorrow morning. Not only are you dealing with the chance for some strong gusty winds and some of these towering storms, but also the chance for some tornadoes and also some flash flooding. They will be producing a lot of rain in a short amount of time. We've got the potential for EF2 or stronger when we're talking about tornadoes. These are some of these long track tornadoes that can go on and can do some damage, moving over a good chunk of real estate that we saw experience the severe weather just last week. And even as we were watching that severe weather last week, Storm Prediction Center was putting these notices out 6 days out, and certainly turned out to be the case as we're watching. Boy, these forecasts, Stephen, have been pretty spot on the past couple of weeks, especially when you're looking at these areas that have been hatched with severe weather.
Yeah, it's true. And it's these same areas that now, as we head into the next couple of hours, could possibly be dealing with the threat. So what we're looking at here, the radar and the overall system, we're going to show you what we're expecting as we head into Wednesday. And then also on Thursday, we have a severe weather threat. So this is expansive, and it's going to continue on. But the severe thunderstorm warnings that we have just outside of Kansas City, I mean, you can see how sprawling this system is. And then we've got the individual severe thunderstorm warnings farther to the north. But as this system marches east, places like Chicago going to be under that threat early tomorrow morning. Perhaps that's when the cold front moves on through. And really, when we talk about this outlook and figuring out where it's going to be, you can essentially, and it's how I've always viewed it, that cold front's going to be somewhere here when this time begins or is valid, which is 7 o'clock Central, so in the morning, tomorrow morning. That front's going to be marching off to the east. And as it does so, and that area of low pressure associated with it will eventually lift, we're going to have an environment through some of these areas, specifically Indiana, Ohio, and Michigan, where things destabilize. And so storms are going to be on the rise. And because the overall evolution of this is just a little slower, that means that Wednesday we have that severe weather threat ticking up just some. So western Tennessee, western Kentucky, into the Hoosier State, Indiana, and then into Ohio. we have to follow this pretty carefully. And also notice that this extends farther to the south, too, because the dynamics will be favorable for us to see the severe weather. And we always have to look around where this highest risk is, with tomorrow it being that level 3 out of 5. So regarding the parameters, we have tornadoes on the table that could very much be strong. So the potential is there for EF2 or greater tornadoes. It includes much of the mitten of Michigan, northern Indiana under that threat. And this is just that enhanced threat. So when we talk about the likelihood, we're dealing with a likely threat here, but regarding the overall wind profile, the sheared environment that we're dealing with, those winds that rotate with height and with magnitude, they increase as you work up in the atmosphere, we could see some stronger tornadoes in this zone. So we'll watch that pretty carefully. And perhaps how radar will look as we head into the morning hours. Keep in mind, remember that outlook starts around 7 o'clock Central. 4 o'clock, the storms, the cold front, still hasn't moved through Peoria. And this evening, we had a tornado-warned storm move right over Peoria. Into St. Louis, relatively quiet. But then as we advance into time, overnight hours, it could be rough. But maybe around 8, 9 o'clock in the morning, the storms move through St. Louis. They move through Peoria, Springfield, Illinois. They'll be knocking on Indy's door by about noon. Fort Wayne, they'll be pushing on through. Detroit, right around noon. But one thing when we're dealing with the timing here, we're going to get that spring sun to heat stuff and sort of destabilize. So these could be re-energized by some of that natural heating, that diurnal heating that occurs. Not going to be a lot, but there is a possibility. It does look like damaging winds are going to be a big threat. Anytime we see that linear formation, the straight line winds are a threat here. And by 6 o'clock, well, the threats then move into parts of New York and western PA. That's by 7, 8 o'clock. We see them sort of fizzle out. And aside from the tornado threat that we have, there's also the large hail threat. So some of these updrafts could be supportive of maybe those hailstones that are about egg size or so. But then by Thursday, as we work into Thursday, that threat does shift a little closer to the I-95 corridor. And it is possible that we could see some of that severe weather a little closer to Philadelphia by Thursday. But as far as this coast-to-coast storm, we're still tracking the severe components by Wednesday into Wednesday night. That's what we've got. And then certainly by Thursday, Craig, making that approach to the I-95 corridor. And then finally, we can say goodbye to this one and just wait for the next one, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, right. It's been such a start to the season. Meantime, Stephen, take a look at the northern side of this. Duluth, Minnesota, snow has been blowing around, and we are talking about blizzard conditions. This has been a major concern. Some spots within 24 hours have received more than 30 inches of snow in 24 hours. So let's get to this portion of the story. We've got a whole lot of snow coming down. We do have blizzard warnings. All of the orange that you see there extend over from North Dakota through South Dakota and into just the northern portion of Nebraska. You still have some winter advisories over portions of, say, Wyoming. And this is a major concern, not just for driving conditions, of course, but calving season. A lot of the ranchers out there have their farm animals out there, and it's calving season. And a lot of these have been dealing with sub-freezing temperatures. You tack on all of this snow, and it's a major concern for our farming communities and our ranchers out here as well. We've also got the ice storms or the ice storm warning in place. Some spots are dealing with icy conditions. Then you factor in some snow on top of that, and boy, what a mess. Look at the winds. We're going to see some gusty winds as well. We do have, by the way, some scattered showers in the form of heavy snow in some pockets. Then you factor in the wind. Even if it's not snowing, the wind will be blowing around, which would create the blizzard, right? It doesn't have to be snowing. If it's blowing the snow around, that's going to be a major concern. You get a lot of those snow drifts piling up on the side of the road. Meantime, take a look at visibility. Drop down to 3 miles or less in some pockets, even down to 1 mile in Pierre. Over to Dickinson, 1 mile as well. Rapid City, just 1.25 miles. Interstates, heavily travel interstates like I-90, I-94, beautiful interstates to travel. When you travel this portion of the country, just having a difficult time. Storm starts to lift out of here, moves up into the north and right over into the Great Lakes. And right behind it, you still have some cold air in place. Some snow still keeps coming down. And most of the heavy snow as we go in through early tomorrow morning for the morning commute is going to be focused over a good chunk of right through Fargo, right through North Dakota. You're going to see some ice in some pockets as well. The wind will still be howling behind it. You've got a few pockets of snow coming down in places like Wyoming, and boy, what a season for the ski areas. I guess that's one side that's a plus, but getting there will be tricky, especially through the passes with the wind blowing around. The snow's still to come when we look at this, and you look at that pocket near Grand Forks, you're talking about another foot of snow on top of these spots, which, again, in 24 hours have received 2 to 3 feet of fresh snow. That's not counting what they had last week as well. Here are the ice storm warnings. McMillan, you are included in there. Ironwood as well. South of Duluth, you've got a lot of the ice, a lot of the winds whipping up against the lakes, and a lot of that could be creating some splash, and that could freeze over onto the roads as well. That's going to be a concern. Look at the ice. Look from Marquette to Duluth. You're talking about 1/10 of an inch to 1/4 of an inch. That is heavy on some of the power lines. And if you've got a 300-foot stretch of power line, and you've got, 1/2 of an inch of ice or so on 1/4 of an inch of ice on that, it feels more like a baby grand piano in some cases. So power lines are at risk. Trees are also, and branches are at risk. And that's a concern for more power outages. So not just from the snow, but from the ice as well. Meantime, a snowstorm continues to blast parts of the plains and the upper Midwest. Duluth, Minnesota is just one area seeing fresh powder as the storm passes. Take a look at that. Fox Weather's Brandy Campbell spoke with residents there and filed this report from Duluth.
Well, while it is officially spring, winter is not done with the Midwest. Some places under a blizzard warning. Here in Duluth, we're under a winter storm warning, and it is delivering everything. We've got snow, we've got sleet, and even graupel. It looks like Dippin' Dots mixed in here. But it's not that enjoyable when you couple it with the wind. Actually, at some times, it's actually uncomfortable. But what can we expect? Well, we could get snow accumulations between 1 to 3 inches, wind gusts up to 60 miles per hour. And at some points, we could have temporary blizzard conditions. We've spoken to some people in the area to get their opinion on this weather at this time of the year.
Right now I'm over it, but I like the snow when it starts, but like this time of year, come on, it's literally spring. It needs to be gone now. I'm ready for planting the garden, flowers, walking around the lake without having to worry about slipping on the ice.
We've had enough. It can just blow itself out and be gone. It'd be just wonderful.
It's been an awful winter. It's been long. It's been more snow than we've ever seen. And this spring ice it just doesn't go away.
Do you have any concerns for the drive home?
No, just go slow. If the sanding and salting trucks are out, the highways are going to be fine. It's the side streets, that have the ice cover on them. Parking lots are extremely icy.
All right, tonight we are expecting sleet to go ahead and mix in with the snow, and we could also have ice accumulations up to 1/4 inch in this area. Reporting here in Duluth, Minnesota, I'm Brandy Campbell, Fox Weather.
And you are watching Fox Weather Live, our continuing coverage of tonight's severe weather threat and the storms that we're going to see. Some have already developed, which is why we have this tornado watch that goes until 10 o'clock Central Time, but we're waiting farther south for more storms to develop. It could be a long night ahead, and we're watching and with you every step of the way. Stay with us. We'll be right back.
With our unique tub-over-tub installation in just a day, Bathfitter doesn't just fit your bath, it fits your busy schedule. Why have over 2 million people welcomed Bathfitter into their homes? It just fits. Bathfitter. Call now or visit bathfitter.com to book your free consultation.
back here with the Fox Weather Alert as we're watching storms move out of Des Moines, but still carrying that severe potential. In fact, we have a handful of severe thunderstorm warnings, and new ones continue to get issued as we watch the threats in bigger cities. Kansas City is now going to be in the line for these storms to roll on through. In fact, those storms are still warned just off to the west of Kansas City, but we're looking at radar, that line of storms associated with that cold front moving on through, and even some additional development there in southern parts of the state of Kansas. So we'll focus in on Kansas right now, just off to the west. Like I said, Kansas City, Kansas, going to see the storms first, and then we'll see them work into Kansas City, Missouri. And the storms themselves, as far as the threats concerned, quarter-size hail, 60-mile-per-hour winds, and these winds perhaps even weakening just a little bit. But perhaps it's the hail that we're really dealing with the threat here. And you see where that hail core was located and where it's moving. In fact, just recently crossing over I-70 north of Lawrence. So yeah, we're picking up about quarter-size hail. That's the severe threshold, so 1 inch in diameter. And as it moves off to the east, it's going to be moving into a more populated spot outside of the suburbs of Kansas City. So Fairmont, Leavenworth, we're going to see, and these storms have had a history. I mean, look at the hail detection. It's more of a probability, a chance of the hail, but we're in good as far as seeing the hail. Confidence has been high that we're going to continue. In fact, there have been some observed reports of hail just outside of Kansas City as this line of storms working on through. We've got a lot of cold air. And what we consider these lapse rates, how fast it cools as you work up in elevation or in altitude. We have a significant lapse rate today, this evening, so we're going to see these significant hailers. Now we head up into southern Wisconsin, northern Illinois, an area familiar, especially the past couple of days with severe weather just on Friday and Saturday. This severe thunderstorm warning for Monroe, Wisconsin, pushing off to the north-northeast, eventually going to be moving into Evansville. It has remained severe warned, and as it works off to the east-northeast, it'll eventually be crossing over I-39 and then I-94. 94 connects really Madison, Wisconsin to Milwaukee, and it's perhaps going to split the difference here. So this storm, Craig, working off to the north, still dealing with some severe weather and also some significant hail too detected in eastern Iowa, about a ping pong ball size hail right now there. So it's an active evening, even though the sun's set.
Yeah, no kidding. And that's been the major concern. We've been talking about these nocturnal storms. Meantime, just before the sun went down, this video coming in from Wendy Wilkie in Lewiston, Illinois, near Lewiston, Illinois, as this storm was moving through. Take a look at that, the tornado. And you can see the base of the cloud there. This was just before the sun went down. This was earlier. So you were able to see it off in the distance. Dark clouds up above. This continued to track off to the north and northeast, fairly close to US 24. We were actually talking with Brad Arnold, who was actually traveling and tracking this same storm. Look at all the lightning flashes, one after the other. A lot of energy with that storm as well. That one moved through earlier today, and population there of Lewistown, by the way, about 2,300 people or so. And this tracked to the north of town. Nonetheless, a lot of people were watching this closely as it moved off to the north. And then some of the roads there, there was some damage reported. It was moving toward Peoria. This was the same system, the same cluster that we watched as it moved closer to Peoria. Meantime, take a look at this video also coming in from Lewistown, Illinois there, from earlier today. Quite a bit of rain on the back side of that, and that was the major concern. If you watch the center of your screen there, and then you look down to where the ground is, you can see the cloud coming out, the base of the cloud, but then closer to where it says hail, right down on the center of your screen, that's where we were watching that rotation as well, Stephen. Boy, what a big evening as we were watching that storm. That was a wide one as well. That was it was one of not a rope one. It looked like it was pretty significant.
It was. It had quite a rotation there at the surface, but how quickly this occurred. And Craig, as these were happening, almost simultaneously too. We were watching the one in Iowa and then the other one in Illinois. And speaking of that time as we were watching that threat in Iowa or in Illinois, we first saw detection detection of this thing in Ipava, and then as it moved toward Lewistown, we saw it produce a little bit of damage just outside. So this was what radar looked like in Fulton County at the time when this tornado warning was issued. And as far as the storm's concerned, a lot of times when we focus on it, we'll see the core of the storm. That's a lot of times where we get the hail associated with it. And with storm trackers, whether it was Brad Arnold, we were watching on 24 this storm. And really, as far as the vantage point and the view that they had of this storm as it was developing in Ipava, I mean, ideal location, right? We weren't dealing with too much rain. Had said that there was a little bit of hail, but the significant hail, and you can see in this 3D imagery that hail core, as we call it. And we've got those winds at the surface that are moving into the storm, that inflow wind, but then right where the tornado was located as it began to develop there in Ipava. And this is a classic setup too. As we get the development of that storm, we saw it initially form in Ipava, and then that decent lead time, that warning, so folks in Lewistown could be prepared. And the good news is that they were prepared and they were equipped and ready to take that shelter. So it was an impressive storm. It was a short-lived storm, but it moved right over Lewistown there. Impressive, right?
It's impressive when you look at it that perspective as well. And this is just a reminder, if you'd like to help out with the tornado relief effort, you can donate to the Red Cross online or by phone. People in so many states need your help. Every little bit goes such a long way. Fox Corporation has donated $1 million to support the Red Cross mission to provide aid and resources to those impacted by the tornadoes. Stay with us right here on Fox Weather Live. Coverage continues as these severe storms continue to pop up. We track them as we go through the overnight hours and into the early morning hours. We're right by your side. We're going to take a quick short break and we will be right back.
This is a Fox Weather Alert, a severe weather threat targeting millions in the central U.S. Tonight, we're already seeing storms spawn dangerous tornadoes. You're looking at one from earlier. Very large hail reported with some of these storms and winds perhaps reaching 70 miles an hour.
Look at that. We are tracking that live right here on Fox Weather, and these storms will impact over 13 states, some of which are still recovering from last week's deadly tornado outbreak.
This is a pretty expansive system, too. It spans from Michigan all the way down to Texas, with some major cities in the bullseye, and we're looking live this evening. Tonight's biggest concern, these dangerous long-track nighttime tornadoes And we're tracking it all right now here on Fox Weather. 11 o'clock on the East Coast, now 10 o'clock with that tornado watch expiring Central Time Zone. That's the good news. I'm Stephen Morgan.
And I'm Craig Herrera. We continue to track these storms, especially down to the south. And the Arctic could be getting a tornado watch. Got to watch for that. There's an 80% probability. Of course, if it comes out, we'll let you know. But that front advances, and it's going to be a one to watch tonight.
And you had mentioned the cap has been in place. That sort of has acted as the limiting factor today, but evidence perhaps that's eroding.
Yeah, and that's going to let those storms bubble up, as you know.
Yep, not going to need the heat for these systems. The winds are strong enough. Let's get right to the radar and track this system as it is moving off to the east. And I say system because there are two areas. In the north, there in Lacona, just check out some of that video. And you can also see the horizontal nature if you look up in the top right, and you eventually get that vertical development with that vorticity.
Looks like a movie, right? It's incredible.
It's wild to see, and really it's based on where the sun's at that we're getting that white color in this tornado. But you guys were watching this thing live, Craig. Brandon Clement tracking this thing.
And take a look at the all the dirt and dust getting thrown up at the base of that, right where it is, right down on the bottom. And we were talking to them earlier. This was before the sun went down, and now the threat continues as it's dark. And some of these, not this one, but some of these have been rain wrapped. Also a concern.
Yeah, that is the bigger concern. And fortunately, in a place like Iowa, when these storm trackers are out, you can see for miles. You're not really dealing with the pollution of trees, and sometimes that can obscure the view. Of course, farther south in Arkansas, you are dealing with the trees and the Ozarks, a beautiful part of the country. But when it comes to tracking storms, specifically tornadoes, it can be a lot tougher. I mean, just think back to a couple of days in Little Rock, Arkansas, right? When we saw that nasty tornado move on through and produce damage, and just to see the rolling hills right over Little Rock. Okay, so let's talk this system because it's a dynamic one, and we are still seeing some severe weather associated with it. The tornado watch has been allowed to expire. That did include parts of Missouri, Iowa, and Illinois. We're right now watching 3 severe thunderstorm warnings to the north and 2 warnings in the Kansas City area. This is all the same system. And where we've had these severe thunderstorm warnings, specifically this one storm, this line is sort of weakening as it's approaching Kansas City. But this specific storm is still producing perhaps some significant hail there. And it's just to the west of Kansas City. So it's over Fairmont, about to move through Leavenworth. North now, it's lifted north of Interstate 70, and perhaps it's going to continue in a direction that will keep it out of the Kansas City metro, but certainly close enough to where the northern suburbs are going to deal with it. But right along I-35, as Stephen McLeod there in Weather Command is circling, these storms are going to make the approach to that 35 corridor, and we'll see the damaging winds associated with it. This severe thunderstorm warning, one of the counties is for Leavenworth in Kansas City, and that's going to perhaps produce some significant hail for the next 10 minutes or so. We have that going for this line. All along the line, really, if you could treat them as individual storms, there have been a few of them that have produced, or at least the likelihood of these storms producing hail has been there. And this one that's just to the west of Fairmont, as far as what we're seeing right now, it has diminished just a little bit, Craig. Perhaps marble size, $half size farther to the north, just to the east of St. Joe. But still, the possibility is there that we could see some severe weather move through the Kansas City metro within the next hour or so.
Yeah, you'll certainly hear it off in the distance, right? Meantime, we've also been tracking the northern side of this, where we've been talking about severe thunderstorm watches. You can see right there, we've got the one up to the north there until 1 o'clock Central Time. You head south a little bit more, including over into Iowa. You're talking in place until 4 a.m. Central. So, yeah, we're watching these throughout the evening hours. Large hail definitely likely, which we have seen with these storms already. In some cases, up to the size of a grapefruit. Flash flooding is possible because a lot of these storms are popping up in the same locations over and over. And we'll watch these through the early morning hours, at least through 4 o'clock, over portions of Des Moines, over to Davenport as well. Meantime, we continue to watch the severe storm threat. And also just watching here, if you're closer to, say, Lake Michigan, there is a marine warning out there, a marine discussion talking about the chance for maybe even a few of these storms producing maybe a water spout or two, especially closer to Lake Michigan as the winds are whipping around. We've got the severe storm threat now, a very likely, this is a level 3 out of 5, extends all the way over through Peoria, through St. Louis as well. And boy, we've been watching these storms with you even since last round, Friday into Saturday morning. Future track, as you watch that line right from Waterloo to Des Moines, this is 11 o'clock this evening, continues to track off to the east. You've got a few storms popping up ahead of the line in places like St. Louis. The main line itself producing a whole lot of energy over Kansas City once we go through the early morning hours. So Kansas City, while you're getting some energy and maybe some large storms, or loud storms rather, right now, early tomorrow morning, you've got another round coming through. Look at the line. Now you're seeing the line congeal once we go through 5 o'clock in the morning from Milwaukee all the way to Chicago. Take that down through Columbia and well south of there as it advances off to the east. You've got a couple of clusters and a few little cells popping up ahead of the main line near Champaign there. But the main energy you can see by 8 o'clock from Peoria down through St. Louis. So the morning commute with these storms coming through could be rowdy. Plus, you could also be dealing with some flash flooding with the rain coming through and being heavy at times. And remember, a lot of these locations have received a lot of rain in the past couple of weeks. Fast forward to 1 o'clock in the afternoon. Now you got places like Fort Wayne to Indianapolis, a good chunk of the state of Indiana now dealing with some heavy rain and potentially some thunderstorms passing through. When we look at the tornado threat through the evening, the hatched area that you see there, we could see some storms producing some tornadoes, and they could be EF2 or stronger. That hatched area includes Cedar Rapids, Davenport, Peoria, Springfield. And then as we look at the overnight hours into early tomorrow morning, boy, it's, make sure you've got your alerts turned on. You've got to be ready to react. And if you've got your Fox Weather app with you, Stephen, as we know, set the critical alert on so that you get notification even if your phone is on silent or vibrate.
Yeah, and especially in the south too, Craig, that's where we're waiting on some of these storms to develop. So we're taking a look there in Fayetteville, Arkansas. Not really a ton to see at the moment, but we still have those warm conditions. It's muggy out there, waiting on a few of these storms to develop. And we've been talking all day about the cap that's been in place that's really prevented a lot of these storms from developing, but we're still going with that significant risk for severe weather. This is through the Missouri and Arkansas Ozarks, just to the west of Little Rock. If you remember, on the 31st of March and on the 1st of April, we had these significant tornadoes move through Little Rock into Wynne, Arkansas, just to the north of Memphis too. Handful of tornadoes in northern Alabama. So this threat zone that we have does encompass some of these areas that were hit hard by tornadoes. And as we've been hearing from our Max Gordon there in Little Rock, there's some tarps over the roofs, but there's not been a lot of progress. I mean, considering it's only been about 4 or 5 days, but even still, there's still a chance that we could get this tornado watch within the next hour or so. We've had some showers and storms move on through. A lot of these are just what we would call elevated, not producing that severe weather threat. And keep in mind, there's still that limiting factor of this warm layer aloft and also some pretty dry air aloft too that's preventing these to really develop, but they could get going within the next hour. So that tornado watch still not issued, but it might be needed within the hour. So something that you carefully be following. We start this at 11 o'clock Central, so within the next hour. Not a lot to show for, right? Let's advance in time. There might be some development, and sometimes it's really hard for these forecast models to pick up on the initialization of these storms, especially when you're dealing with an atmosphere that is having a cap in place. See all the time in Texas when I worked in Houston. But then one thing's for certain, as we head into the early morning hours, we are going to get this cold front that swings through. This cold front, as it works through the south, moves through Texas, Oklahoma, and Arkansas. That will bring the severe storm threat. But really, it's not so much these storms that the folks there at the Storm Prediction Center are highlighting for the potential tornado watch. It's really what might develop within the next hour. But these storms will probably work on through, and they could produce some heavy rain. There might be a flooding threat that we have, especially in the Arklatex region. I mean, some nasty storms by about 8 o'clock on Wednesday. But that threat will have already shifted off to the east ahead of this cold front. The cold front, at least in the morning hours through Arkansas, will bring some heavy rain, probably some strong storms. But as far as the damaging wind, the hail, and the tornadic threat, not as high by Wednesday morning. But these showers and storms, nonetheless, are still going to work on through. This potential for EF2 tornadoes that we're focused on, it would be within the next few hours in parts of Arkansas. So Jonesboro, Little Rock, down into Texarkana and Sulphur Springs. So something that will follow, of course, Craig, as we head into the next couple of hours. The potential for those strong tornadoes certainly there.
Boy, and what an afternoon and evening. We have some new video coming into Fox Weather here. Take a look at that lightning strike.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Across the sky.
Across the sky. Cedar Rapids at a cloud to cloud right there, and then cloud to ground. Watch that zip across cloud to cloud, right? Oftentimes you hear that term. That's what you're talking about. And then when you see the cloud to ground as well, it's just impressive. This is Cedar Rapids, Iowa. Boy, Iowa has been hit. So, that's been an active state.
It has been, and so early in the season too.
So early.
Talking to Brad Arnold, one of the storm trackers, who's for years tracked, and you typically are still tracking in the south where the warmer air is. But
right.
These systems have brought that warm air, that unstable air, far enough north to places like Iowa, to Cedar Rapids. We've seen a couple of rounds of these storms. Hey, if it was just lightning like this, I could do a storm like that.
That wouldn't be bad, right? An electric storm like that, not bad to watch from a distance. Meantime, well, you talked about that warm air. It was last week that made it all the way to Iowa. This week, again, here's another perspective. This taken from Knoxville, Iowa, that rope tornado. Look at that.
And that's what, that's what you and Bridget were tracking this, Greg, and these different communities all around Lewistown, you're able to see for miles and to have this sort of vantage point.
Yeah, it's impressive, and there are a lot of farming communities out here, of course, but when you see that off from a distance, you're driving by, and you're just like, wow, is that real? And then you look down to the ground, and you can see the debris, the dust being pushed up or pulled up, right, within that storm. So you know that's, and just look the way it ropes around.
Yeah.
I mean, honestly, it looks like a movie if you're not used to seeing that kind of thing.
And one thing about that, too, you could even see a power flash, too, as that tornado was moving on through. But these storms farther north in Iowa, the cloud bases are a little higher in the sky, so you do get that vertical development. A lot of times with, of course, these nastier tornadoes, they're so close to the ground and you don't get this vantage point. But sometimes in the north, you have this privilege.
And what timing, too, right? At least, I mean, there was still some daylight up. This was just before the sun went down. But meantime, we continue to watch these images come in. You could watch this over and over. We've also got a powerful blizzard that's blowing through portions of the northern plains and into the upper Midwest yet again. This is video coming in from Duluth, Minnesota, where at times the snow's been blowing around. You've got some ice in some conditions, and yes, they're treating the roads, but a lot of that can also turn to slush, and then you've got a mess, and then you've got ice as well. And look at this. These are some snowfall totals in just 24 hours. 33 inches of snow in Glen Rock, Wyoming, 33 inches in 24 hours. That's more than an inch per hour. You step outside for 6 hours, you come back outside, and you've got 6 inches plus on the ground. Hot Springs, Maryland, into South Dakota, rather, 30 inches of snow. Manville, Wyoming, 30 inches of snow. Lance Creek, Wyoming, 26. And Harrison, Nebraska, can't leave you out, 20 inches of snow for you. We still have some blizzard warnings in place through early tomorrow morning, and this is going to extend all the way from Grand Forks down through a good chunk of, say, North Dakota, South Dakota, and just now no longer into Nebraska, but it was just edging in there. Meantime, we got plenty of snow coming down, and then notice the ice storm warning. Ironwood could be dealing with some ice. It's going to be tough go on the morning commute tomorrow morning, and then you've got temperatures in the 20s. It's going to stick around for some time. Then you've got some wind, a lot of wind in some cases. It's been howling, 30 to 40, even 60 mile per hour gusts is what we saw earlier. Right now, Duluth, you still have a 61 mile per hour gust. It has been nonstop for you in Duluth for a good chunk of the afternoon and now into the evening hours. Of course, visibility has been reduced, especially with all the blowing snow. It doesn't have to be falling. It's just blowing around because there's so much down on the ground. A quarter of a mile visibility in Duluth with wind gusts up to 65 miles per hour. If anything, it's best to stay in. That's just tough to see. You can't really make your way around the roads. And then you take a look at future track this evening through early tomorrow. Notice we still have some cold air being wrapped in on the back side of that. All the pink that you see is going to be that frozen precipitation, in some cases some ice. Could also cause power outages, not just only because of the windy conditions, but because of all the ice piling up on a lot of these power lines, something to be concerned with. This is now 10 o'clock as we're going through Wednesday evening. Still some lingering showers on the backside of that into the Intermountain West, specifically really for Wyoming and into the northern Rockies. Then you look at what's left over and what's expected with the snowfall, and you can still see up to 8 to 12 inches of fresh snow right in and around Grand Forks. South of there, that lighter pink that you see, 5 to 8 inches of snow. And then all the way down south through a good chunk of South Dakota, you're dealing with another 1 to 2 inches of snow. And just last week, you were talking a foot of fresh snow, just no break, and all of that is still on the ground and adding up. Ice storm warnings you can see there from McMillan. Ironwood is included in that. South of there, you've got those winter weather advisories, and there's some strong winds right now coming off of Lake Michigan on the western side, on the western shores out there. So maybe watching for some isolated thunderstorms popping up, maybe even some waterspouts coming off of the lake. As we look at the ice forecast, the brighter shades and the closer you are to the lake, you got plenty of moisture to work with. You're talking about 1/10 to 1/4 of an inch of ice. That's going to add up on a lot of the power lines. That's going to be a major concern through the overnight hours and into tomorrow. So please make sure that you are ready, especially if you've got power outages. You saw the temperatures into the 20s and 30s. It's a good time to just be aware, especially into tomorrow. If you've got to be driving around tomorrow morning, if you could put it off, that would be great. Stephen, it's just nonstop. They've been getting storm after storm after storm, and it looks like we continue to get more in the way of this snow and even ice for a good chunk of the Great Lakes region. I wish we had a better news for you. And I know it's, it can happen, but we just can't get a break.
Yeah, winter still has a grip on the Great Lakes as this next system moves on through, but we're also very much seeing it act a lot like spring farther to the south. We're watching some storms approach the Kansas City metro. Our continuing coverage. We'll be back here in just a couple of minutes as severe weather threatens Iowa, Illinois, Missouri, Kansas, and farther south as we head into the overnight hours. We'll be right back. To Fox Weather as we're taking a look there in Fayetteville, Arkansas. Also in Arkansas, the city of Fort Smith, one of the areas watching that severe weather threat tonight. Let's bring in Fort Smith, Arkansas Public Relations Manager Josh Bufink joining us now by a phone. Josh, good evening. Perhaps going to be a late night for you guys as you anticipate kind of wait for this severe weather. What's the plan? Is it is sort of a wait and see scenario right now?
Yeah, just kind of a wait and see thing. And, we're just trying to make sure that people are aware and staying vigilant.
Yeah, you've been going through this week after week. Is there a bit of storm fatigue, or are people still paying attention to the warnings?
I think people are still largely paying attention. I know that it can get tiring, hearing this several days in a row, but we just want to make sure that people do stay alert and stay aware of what's happening.
Mm-hmm. When it comes to Fort Smith, I mean, throughout the state of Arkansas, does the town have tornado sirens? I mean, what's the best way for folks there to get alerts?
Yeah, so we do have sirens, and as soon as those sirens go off, we encourage people to get in their safe place as soon as possible. That would be, the lowest level of their home. If they have a basement in there, a central room with no windows. And then we do have shelters across the city that as soon as those sirens go off, they open. They're at all the elementary schools and the junior highs, and they're open to the public as well. When you get in your safe place, we just recommend that, you have an emergency kit with you, some water, some non-perishable items, flashlight, radio, some way to keep informed with what's going on. But mostly just get in a safe spot in your home and have a plan going into tonight.
All great messages. You have some major interstates that run through your great city. You've been there a couple of times.
Yeah.
Do you have, a lot of these big rigs drive through there, and they need a safe place as well. People on the roads, do they all have a place to go as well?
Yes, so they can. They can stop off. We just recommend that you don't try to drive through the storm, that you stop and you don't drive through it.
Yeah, I think that's the biggest threat too, especially with the nature of storms that we might be dealing with tonight. I mean, we haven't seen much, had some showers moving on through. I think one thing, Josh, that has been of particular concern in western Arkansas has been the flooding. You guys have been drenched this season with that rain. That flooding concern, a little bit of a break recently. I mean, will you guys be able to handle a little bit of rain as these storms develop and move through?
Yes, definitely. And the best way to stay alerted about all the floods and making sure that you're not driving through an area that may be impassable is to actually sign up for our Gov Delivery emails. You can do that by going to cofs.info/stay connected, and that'll keep you up to date on what roads are closed, what may be impassable as floods happen.
And Josh, we did talk, since the ground rather is so saturated, any little bit of wind could obviously bring down some power lines, cause some power outages. Do you have staff in place? Are you all ready to respond if needed?
Yes, definitely. And if you see a downed power line, don't touch it. Please alert us as soon as possible. You can call 911. You can report that to your utility company, but do not go near any downed power lines.
Yeah, that's always the immediate danger. I mean, I'm thinking of some images from Wynne, Arkansas, from Little Rock, just the past couple of days, and especially after these storms move on through, the first thing, especially when it's dark out, you head outside and a lot of times not thinking. So having those things top of mind, very important. Josh Bufink, we appreciate your time, Fort Smith, Arkansas Public Relations Manager, for joining us. Hopefully we don't see any storms that move on through, but you all stay safe.
That's a hope. Thank you so much. And tonight, as we go into these storms, please remember to keep your phones next to you, keep your notifications on and loud so that they can wake you up if anything does occur, which I hope they don't.
Yeah, you need that too, because sleep can be a big distraction.
Oh, yeah. You're still going to work in the morning. Got to make sure that you can wake up if you need to.
Yeah.
On your Fox Weather app, we've got the critical alerts. You want to turn those on so that it will still alert you if your phone is on silent or vibrate as well.
And it goes to that point that you were mentioning about the storm fatigue too, because Arkansas, just a couple of days ago, we were under this significant risk. It was upgraded to a high risk the day of. And now that we're later into the evening, people's guards might be down.
Yeah, absolutely. In fact, let's time it out just to give you an idea of what's going on as we look at these storms into the day tomorrow. Now, we do have a level 3 threat. Does extend into portions of the Ohio Valley early tomorrow morning. Places like Chicago that have been dealing with some storms today could be dealing with storms tomorrow during the morning commute. It goes all the way down into Memphis. Memphis, we're talking about you again. We just keep talking about Memphis. This goes into Middle Tennessee, Nashville included, the level 3, Indianapolis, Cincinnati, all major cities and a lot of towns affected by this area as well. That possibility goes all the way into a good portion of Pennsylvania, right into West Virginia. You've got the chance to see some of these storms pop up. Meantime, when you look at the tornado threat as we go through the day tomorrow, there is the possibility where you could still see some strong tornadoes, EF2 or stronger. And look at this, for a good portion of the Mitten, Michigan, all the way down in through Fort Wayne, a good chunk of Indiana, right down to Indianapolis, included in that, where you could see some of those large tornadoes, EF2 or stronger. And then you watch this. This is Future Track, early tomorrow morning, 4 o'clock. Notice I said there's Milwaukee, there's Chicago. You head on down to Peoria. Peoria just, was watching closely the radar tonight. Tomorrow morning, you get a lot of heavy rain moves through, maybe some of these twisting storms. This is now 12 o'clock. And notice the Mitten of Michigan dealing with a lot of the stronger storms, also some heavy rain, could be dealing with some flash flooding in some cases. A lot of these storms develop in the same location, producing a whole lot of rain and moving relatively slowly if you think about it that way, because now we're looking at 6 o'clock, and now you've only moved into places like Buffalo, all the way over to Cleveland. Take that down into Lexington, Kentucky. You're talking about Paducah. Paducah still dealing with some pockets of heavy rain. We've got a few more rounds that set up in some of the same locations, including portions of Middle Tennessee, right up and through a good portion of the Smokies, the Appalachians. You take that into the Allegheny Mountains, and where you've got a little bit of lift, you could squeeze out a lot of moisture and be dealing with a little more in the way of flash flooding. Could be dealing with some hail with these storms as well. Large hail at that, potentially 2 inches in diameter or better. And you saw just how big a 2-inch hail can be. It can do some damage to your car, anything that's left outside. We watched this coast-to-coast storm. Remember, it started off in the Pacific Northwest over the weekend, dropped into the Rockies, got picked up by that strong jet, and really started to flip over and move to the north and northeast. So now we've got that chance with the red, where you could see those severe storms popping up through the day tomorrow. Look at the temperatures. They quickly rebound. You're talking about temperatures into the 70s and 80s, and dew points are pretty high up. We just got through some hot weather. We'll see the temperatures rebound, and all of that hot air goes well up into the north. This is just a few weeks ahead of time, but here we go again. Second week where we're dealing with this. Wednesday evening, we drop into the 40s. The severe weather threat continues, especially close to the front right where it advances. Plenty of rain to contend with. Now you're looking at Thursday. Temperatures, look at this. You're looking at temperatures in the 80s. Right along portions of the Delmarva. New York City at 79 degrees, showers and thunderstorms. You can see some of those storms become a little more severe, and that does include places along the Delmarva, the Jersey Shore, right into portions of Pennsylvania. You can see Philadelphia included in there. We just saw some severe weather move through New Jersey just over the weekend. We take this down into Asheville, North Carolina, and right along the Smokies. You take a look at Washington, D.C., boy, I hope you got a chance to get in there and see some of the blooms, because we got some more showers and thunderstorms coming in on Thursday. Stay with us. You're watching Fox Weather, and we continue to track this severe weather threat as we go through the evening hours. We're looking at the radar right now. You can see some of the storms popping up just north of Kansas City, and some of these storms are producing some heavy rain. Stay with us. We'll be right back.
This is a Fox Weather Alert, a severe weather threat targeting millions in the central U.S. Tonight, we're already seeing storms spawn dangerous tornadoes, very large hail, and 70-mile-an-hour plus winds as this threat for these storms persists into the overnight hours. These storms have the threat of possibly affecting 13 different states, millions of people in the zone. Some of these areas still recovering from last week's deadly tornado outbreak. And this is a pretty expansive system spanning from Michigan all the way down to Texas, with some of those big cities in the bullseye. Tonight's biggest concern, dangerous long-track nighttime tornadoes. And we're tracking it all right now here on Fox Weather. Welcome on in. It's the bottom of the hour. I'm Stephen Morgan. Thanks for watching us here on Fox Weather. As far as the severe weather threat is concerned, we're still watching some storms to the north. These storms have had the history of producing some significant hail, and not a ton when we talk about the tornadic element, but we still have that threat even though we're heading into the evening. It's easy to let that guard down, especially as we go into the overnight hours, perhaps heading to bed, but right through northern Illinois, into southern Wisconsin, parts of eastern Iowa, still under the threat for seeing some of this severe weather. Now, farther to the south, it is a waiting game. As we approach 11 o'clock, we're waiting in the central time zone for some of these storms in Oklahoma, parts of Texas, perhaps to develop. And as far as the threat is concerned, as we're watching that overall threat, it looks to be the most significant farther to the south still, as we have that level 4 out of 5 threat through the Missouri Ozarks into Arkansas, south a little closer to the Ark-La-Tex region. But at least where the severe weather is right now, it's farther to the north. We're talking Illinois, parts of southern Wisconsin. In fact, the 3 severe thunderstorm warnings that we have right now, those are in Iowa and in Wisconsin. We'll get to those in a minute, encompassing 233,000 people. And check out some of this hail, too. I mean, we're talking about hailstones in Davenport, bigger than baseballs, and even the next threshold, that 3-inch in diameter, right around what would be a coffee or teacup for that sort of hail size. That's impressive. These storms that we're watching, though, this is still, as far as the warning area, we're using the radar just west of Milwaukee. A couple of storms here lifting off to the north. You can see the overall formation, a broken line of storms here, and as they lift off to the north, each one of these storms could perhaps produce a tornado. We still have that tornado possible tag, that wording that's used by the National Weather Service sometimes. And as we were talking, this newest issued severe thunderstorm warning does include on the northern tier, the Wisconsin Dells and Baraboo also under that severe thunderstorm warning. So this is expanded a little farther to the north, right along I-39 here, that heads up into the Wisconsin Dells out of Madison, Wisconsin. As far as the threat is concerned, 60-mile-per-hour winds associated with it, and then we're also dealing with hail that might be about $half size or so. Off to the west, this is more of the frontal component of this system as we have this cold front working through. It's this storm that has that tornado possible tag, so it's just to the west of Cedar Rapids. The majority of the line will pass to the north of Cedar Rapids, at least the segment that is warned at the moment, but there's still that possibility, some very broad rotation right along 20 or 380 here. It's not looking like it's anything impressive at all, but we could maybe see that rotation quickly spin up. But at the moment, this severe thunderstorm warning, which runs until 11:15 in Buchanan County there in Iowa, it's as a result of the 60-mile-per-hour winds that we could see, and perhaps that hail a little closer to $half size or quarters. So these storms, this is really where that cold front, you can argue, is located. We've already seen the storms move out of Des Moines, and they are still marching off to the east. In fact, right along I-80 here, they are going to be moving into Iowa City here soon, and then as this line moves through, then that threat will be diminishing or weakening in Iowa, which is some good news. But of course, storm trackers have been out throughout the day, and meteorologists across the country have been following this system. Let's get a check now and bring in field meteorologist, also storm tracker, Brett Adair, has been driving around this evening, joining us by phone. And Brett, as far as your location, tell us where you're at and what you've been seeing throughout the afternoon. And we'll also show some video of the tornadoes that a couple of your colleagues captured earlier, too.
Well, Stephen, we are actually around Conway, Arkansas right now. We have, dealt with a rather tranquil day, very warm, windy conditions, very moist here as well. We expected, a threat to develop into the overnight hours, which we are still kind of watching very, very closely here across portions of central Arkansas, where we're in that moderate level 4 out of 5 risk area. It's still in place overnight tonight. So far, we've seen a little bit of activity coming through the Little Rock proper region over the last hour. We've had a couple thunderstorms with some lightning strikes with the most intense activity to the east of town, out toward Brinkley and Augusta, Arkansas. Those storms, however, still haven't quite gotten that look where they're surface-based, but there is the potential for that to happen, especially as we see some of the energy kick out of the southern plain states over Kansas and Oklahoma and moving to Arkansas. A little bit later tonight, we could see some of those thunderstorms develop and go into rotation. That's the reason that there's still a chance, and the Storm Prediction Center is highlighting this area for the chance of a potential strong long-track tornado. It's a little more conditional than the other day versus being a widespread type event, but the potential is there. And now we're in the overnight hours where you're not going to be able to see it. You're going to have to get those warnings, via your NOAA weather radio, your wireless alert systems on your cell phone, as we've gotten beyond nightfall. But as you mentioned, up north, we've also dealt with some tornadic activity today. A couple of our colleagues with LSM, captured some tornadoes there across central Iowa, east of Des Moines, and then central Illinois there, just south of Peoria, been dealing with some tornadic activity. So it's been a busy day already up north, and we're just gearing up to see what may transpire down here further south.
And Brett, you're so close to Little Rock, which we know just a few days ago was hit so hard by a tornado that eventually moved through Wynne, Arkansas. So there has been plenty of activity in Arkansas. I'm sure you as a tracker, you're sort of used to this wait and see potential. And there have been several events perhaps where we have that threat, but all the, parameters that we look at in the atmosphere just don't match up, and we don't see the storms. Which is, hey, it's good. Arkansas doesn't need the storms, but as you had mentioned, we saw those farther to the north. I mean, speak to those limiting factors that we have in Arkansas. There has been this cap that's been in place, but still maybe some upper level support that could push in through the plains later this evening.
Yeah, that has definitely been the limiting factor today. We actually had some drier air just above the surface, and some of that mixed down across portions of Arkansas to the surface layer. Our dew points dropped into the upper 50s, lower 60s across areas just to the west of Little Rock. So that was part of the problem that, inhibited some of those storms from developing, which, as you said, is a great thing. We were here when Little Rock was hit on Friday by the tornado and watched that tornado happen live here on Fox Weather. And, this area there's many contractors in the area right now working on the power grid, working on the cleanup efforts. So, a lot of this is, very unwelcome. If we can get through the night tonight without dealing with issues, that would be a blessing to these people, trying to basically get their lives back after dealing with such devastating day on Friday. So we're here and felt kind of obligated to stay to the south. Most of my colleagues decided to play up north on that Iowa, Missouri, Illinois area where, a lot of the tornadic activity could be seen more in fields, even though I do know there's been some damage down here in this particular region. If you deal with tornadoes, in most cases, unfortunately, they're going to impact population a little bit more, and then you can deal with, the potential for injuries and fatalities, and we do not want that. So we wanted to be able to stay here and serve this region.
I remember, that video that you guys captured in Little Rock as that tornado moved through. What we saw with your colleagues, Brad Arnold and even Brandon Clement as we had that rope tornado. I'm not sure if you saw that in Lacona, but it was certainly impressive to see. But in Little Rock, that tornado from a couple of days ago was just nasty. And also the topography. You're dealing with hills and a lot of trees. That sort of complicates things too when you're tracking these storms. Yeah.
Absolutely. And, those guys did a wonderful job up there catching up with those storms today up along the warm frontal zone. And, they had some daylight to work with, and that's a big difference now versus Friday down here in the Ozarks. We could be dealing with some of these storms in a little bit more mountainous terrain, plus we're dealing with overnight conditions versus having, the mid-afternoon hours to physically see what's coming. So, again, our hope is that we can get through the night, and considering that there are some limiting factors, that is possible we could get through the night without those individual storms really developing and posing the tornado.
Introducing Remarkable 2, the next generation paper tablet.
Tomorrow, we had the Storm Prediction Center upgrade that to a very likely threat this morning, that level 3 out of 5 threat, and that it expands a lot of real estate. I mean, we're talking Michigan all the way to the south. You see that chance for the severe weather? Are there areas perhaps that you're targeting for maybe seeing these storms produce tornadoes if they do?
Well, most definitely, Stephen. That's one thing that has changed in terms of the forecast. Our upper level energy that we've been talking about, that we're kind of lacking right now in this area, has slowed down. Well, with that happening, it is going to overlap possibly the afternoon hours tomorrow across, some of the areas that were hit today up north across, portions of Illinois, but Michigan, Indiana, down through Kentucky, Tennessee, Mississippi, and eastern Arkansas are now in that threat as well, because we're going to see some daytime heating, and we're going to have a little bit more energy than we were supposed to have, based on our forecasting a couple of days ago. So we definitely are looking at that region. The lower Mississippi Valley area is one target, maybe the eastern Arkansas Delta over near Memphis again, that was hit particularly hard on Friday. And then, further to the north, areas like Indianapolis, Fort Wayne, Lansing, Michigan, they could be in the line of fire tomorrow afternoon. So, yes, everybody needs to be weather aware yet again on Wednesday.
Yeah, that's a threat that we're watching pretty carefully here. And then Thursday, that storm chance pushes off to the east. It must be spring, because those threats, we see it happen too, that upgraded threat as this energy, sometimes it's a little more stubborn and it doesn't move as fast as the forecast models are hinting at. So it can change in a moment's notice, as you're well aware of. And I know you'll be watching them. Well, Brett, thank you for joining us this evening. Field meteorologist and storm tracker Brett Adair in Conway, Arkansas. You guys stay safe. Hopefully we don't see much development. I think Arkansas could use a break this evening, but it's important before going to bed, you set that alarm clock or have those alerts turned on that you can know. At least check the radar in the middle of the night, right?
Absolutely, Stephen, and stay here with us, because if severe weather breaks out, we're definitely going to be out in front of it.
Yeah, gotta follow it. It's been awful what we've seen in Arkansas. Let's hope for a break tonight. Brett Adair, appreciate your time. Let's continue tracking this system though, because regarding the tornadoes that we were following and saw live here on Fox Weather, we had really two of them, and one was in Lewistown. That's the cluster of reports that we have just southwest of Peoria. That storm ended up tracking north into Peoria. And then southeast of Des Moines, This was a little closer to Lacona, Iowa, which is where we had that impressive rope tornado. And that storm, as it was moving through, it was brief and short-lived as well. But Iowa and Illinois in this zone where we had the threat. Now, as far as reports are concerned, the surveys will be done. But in Sandyville and in Milo, we had different reports of this tornado in Sandyville touching down, and then the debris was reported southeast of Milo. Farther to the east in Lewistown, of course, we saw those photos from social media, this mangled farm equipment in the road. And then in Fandon, too, also in the town of Fandon, just to the south of Macomb City, quarter-size hail. Some of these storms, before they produced that tornado, which moved through just on the western side of Lewistown and on the north side of Lewistown, produced a little bit of hail. So we saw that. Here's the threats that we have. As far as the severe thunderstorm watches are concerned, all tornado watches have been expired, but the severe thunderstorm watches, we have them running until 1 o'clock Central Time. That's through parts of southwestern Wisconsin and northeastern Iowa. Until 4 o'clock, we have a slightly more expansive severe thunderstorm watch, and that extends farther to the south into southeastern Iowa. So we haven't had this cold front move through yet, but as this front marches off to the east, that's when we'll see this severe thunderstorm watch sort of get chiseled away, and these counties from the west to the east perhaps dropped. But Madison, Wisconsin, still under that severe thunderstorm watch, as we have a couple of storms that are lifting to the north. So that's what we have in Iowa and in Wisconsin. What we've also seen from the Storm Prediction Center has been that significant risk dropped completely, and we just have the very likely threat now for the severe weather. So as this front works off to the east, and roughly focused here, that cold front marching off to the east this evening, and it's going to be a little slower to march farther to the south off to the east. It still will be carving a path, but as this does push towards Chicago, perhaps by rush hour, we could be dealing with some storms yet again in the Chicago area. In fact, we had some storms move on through, but until this front moves on through, we're going to deal with that threat. As far as timing it out, and we look overall at how this line of storms